This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakelin.
You put me in an ATST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot?
Now you're talking. And Paul Tobin in the third chair.
I'll do my best.
With contributions from Total Fangirl
Vampires do not sparkle.
and our loyal listener.
Crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, coming at the speed of a Thunder Happy Pharmaceuticals combat mech running with reactors at maximum. Today's edition is brought to you by all of our friends over at Patreon that help us keep the lights on. Today, that's John Haley, John Maddock, John Mitch, it's the Johns, Jonathan, just plain Jonathan, Jonathan Wengler. It just goes on and on and on. I'm Geekly McNardigan, your host. Today our panelists are Russ Wall E. Wakelin and creator of Worlds and senior concept designer at Weta Workshop, Paul Tom Servo Tobin. Let's begin. Issue number 1. Robots can be defined as machines capable of carrying out a complex series of actions automatically, or more commonly in science fiction, machines resembling a human being and able to replicate certain human movements and functions automatically. In either guise, they have been a part of speculative fiction for thousands of years. Question. What was the name of the first robot ever to be portrayed on film? Argus Guard Reventlov Russ.
Robbie the Robot.
Damn. That's what I was
Positronic
gonna say.
Man Paul. Robbie the Robot.
Yes!
I was just going to say, you've already
That
said it.
technically makes you both wrong.
What?
The answer would be the Maschinenmensch. That's machine human in German, according to my pronunciation. A female-seeming humanoid robot, also called Parody, Futura, Robotrix, or the Maria Impersonator from the Fritz Lang 1927 classic Metropolis.
Oh, yes!
Which makes you both legitimately wrong. Issue number 2. Special effects are illusions or visual tricks used in the film, television, and other performance genres to simulate imagined events in a story. Special effects were traditionally divided into optical effects and mechanical effects, but with the emergence of digital filmmaking, a distinction between special effects and visual effects has grown, with the latter referring to digital post-production, while special effects more often refers to mechanical and optical effects. I hope you were paying attention to all that. Question. In 1895, Alfred Clark created which is commonly accepted as the first ever motion picture special effect. What action did he recreate? George Roby Russ.
A bug flying.
James Parrott Paul.
A dog running. It's got to be the dog.
In fact, it is the beheading of Mary, Queen of Scots.
Oh.
I would have also accepted any beheading or any execution. Hell, I can say at this point that I'd accept almost anything except what you guys said, because that's just wrong. Issue number 3. The word mecha is an abbreviation first used in Japanese of the word mechanical. In Japanese, mecha encompasses all mechanical objects, including cars, guns, computers, and other devices. And the term robot or giant robot is used to distinguish limbed vehicles from other mechanical devices. It has more widely become associated with large robots with limbs or other biological characteristics. Question. Who was the author who wrote La Maison au Vapeur? Which is my pronunciation in the French, or The Steam House, which featured the first giant robot, a steam-powered elephant, in 1880. Mr. Roboto Russ.
I'm going to go with Jules Verne.
Peace Nay Necron 99 Paul.
I'm going to go Jules Verne as well.
And you both got one right! It's Jules Verne!
Cheers, Paul. Well
Technically a gimme, but it still counts. Issue number 4. Corporations have used sports and other competitive events to help market their product, brand, and messaging for decades. Hell, there was probably some Athenian sandal maker providing free sandals at the first Olympians, if they had worn sandals. If they had worn anything. Anyway, business has long been realized that getting their name out there during well-publicized events is a great way to garner attention and goodwill with their potential consumers. Question. What sporting event was first sponsored by Slazenger's Sporting Goods of London from 1902 to 2015? Patrick Rafter Russ.
Soccer or football.
Din Palis Paul.
The Wimbledon tennis tournament.
Ooh.
Oh, Paul!
Oh, Paul pulls it out.
Out of left field, Paul scores a 50%. That's some kind of record. Paul is correct, which makes Russ wrong. That's it for now. Thanks for listening, and good night.
This episode of the D6 Generation is brought to you by Lone Wolf Development. Take your game to the next level.
And by Geek Nation Tours. Rise up and join the Geek Nation, touring the world at geeknationtours.com.
And by Audible. Try the service, get a free book, and support the show. All by visiting audibletrial.com/D6G. Hello!
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, and welcome to episode 208.
208 sounds legit, doesn't it?
It is, of the D6 Generation. I'm Russ Wakelin.
I'm Craig Gallant.
And I'm Paul Tobin.
Hey, Paul, welcome to the show. Craig, can you believe we have a gentleman from Weta Workshop right here on the D6 Generation?
It's
this is
giving
freaking
me
out.
chills, Russ.
I'm getting a little goosebumps. You can't see them all the way from down under, but I have. Now, let me ask you this. Are you in New Zealand or Australia?
That's right. I'm calling in from Wellington, New Zealand.
Now in New Zealand, are you technically down under, or are you off to the left or right?
I think it's fair to say we are down under, but
Okay.
that can be mistaken as Australia, and we certainly wouldn't want that.
Now,
No.
in New Zealand, do you in fact eat Vegemite, or is that not a thing there?
We actually have two competing brands, Vegemite and Marmite, and people get quite head up over it, depending on which of the two they choose to support.
Now, which I'm going to put you on the spot. Which camp are you in?
I'm definitely Marmite, but we had a very severe earthquake down in Christchurch and took out the factory that made Marmite. So the whole country was deprived for 2 years.
That sounds.
It just about started, civil revolution.
Now, let me ask you this: in New Zealand? Do you have Tim Tams in New Zealand?
We certainly do. That's quite British, isn't it?
It is,
The
well, a
Tim Tam.
bit, but here in the States we think of them as Australian. I don't know why. But now, do you do the Tim Tam Slam? Is that something you're familiar with?
No, that sounds dangerous. What exactly does that mean?
Well, it involves. So there are several levels to this practice that I did in fact learn from Australians. So I assume it's true, but and what
They tend to wildly exaggerate. So,
Right.
but carry on.
So my understanding is you take a Tim Tam. Now, for those of you in the U.S. who do not know what a Tim Tam is, they do sell them at Target now. They are sort of a wafer cookie that's coated in chocolate, right? And what you do is you bite off both ends of the Tim Tam, thus creating a straw of sorts. And you stick. Now, the rookie Tim Tam Slam is that you then suck milk up through the Tim Tam so that the entire interior is then full of milk and creates a mushy, chocolatey goodness that you then eat. Or for the ultimate Tim Tam Slam, I'm not making this up. People send in emails to Craig. He's not believing me. The ultimate version of this.
Don't email me. Sounds good to me.
You do the same thing with hot chocolate. This is also a thing, apparently. So I'm not making. So you're not familiar with this. This would be an Australian, not New Zealand thing. Is what you're telling me, Paul.
I think this is, if it's been done in New Zealand, I've never witnessed it myself.
Fair. All right.
I have witnessed the very bizarre practice that they have in the UK, where they get a Mars bar, which I think you guys are probably familiar with,
Yes.
or the equivalent of a Snickers bar, and deep fry it, which is very strange to me.
Yes,
But
That doesn't sound
If you've been
healthy.
south of the Mason-Dixon line in the United States, you've seen just about everything fried at one point. That's something we do here. Or do south of here, I should say. Well, great, Paul. Thank you for having us on the show. Now, Paul, what is your official title? I'm using air quotes. What is your official title there at Weta?
well, we don't. To be honest, we're a very informal company, so we don't really do titles. But certainly, I do something. I turn up and do a job. So I'm a concept designer, and I guess sometimes they use the word senior concept designer. I think that's mainly just a bit of a poking at fun of me at the fact that I'm more of the geriatric generation.
You're old. Is what you're
I've been
telling me.
here for about 15 years.
Nice.
So I think really I'm a sort of senior concept designer.
And so we're excited to have you on the show today because you're going to share all the cool work you've been doing on giant killer robots with us. But what are some other projects you've worked at Weta prior to giant killer robots?
My first film gig was working on Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Narnia films.
Yeah.
Which was I know I'd only just finished at design school, so that was a pretty amazing break to pretty much go straight from design school and end up working on a major feature film. So that was really exciting. And of course, at the time, we were doing King Kong at the same time, so that was a pretty epic. And then sort of more recently, I guess, well, sort of the main highlights, I spent quite a bit of time working on Avatar. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the Hobbit trilogy was about 7 years of my life. Right. And also quite bizarrely, in the more recent times, I've actually started working on a few games, not board games, but digital games like Shadow of Mordor. So that's it's been really fun. I mean, obviously, it's a real dream job.
Yeah, so you've been living in sort of the Tolkien Lord of the Rings world for quite a bit there too. It sounds like during all this.
Very, very much so, and that was, you know, it was one of the first fantasy books I ever read. In fact, the first fantasy book I ever read was Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and then the second one was The Hobbit. So it is kind of weird that I'm literally following what I read as a kid. So yeah, I've literally spent years in those worlds, and I've spent years in those worlds role playing as well. So it's awesome. It's kind of fun.
You really are living the dream. That is fantastic. I'm super jealous. That is awesome.
Now, what kind of things did you do for, let's say, The Hobbit?
As when we at Weta Workshop, we tend to specialize on the sort of weapons, and costume and armor was a big part of what we did, and also the creatures. So there was the art department, and they did a lot of the scenery and sort of the costumes and that kind of side of things. But at Weta Workshop, we kind of focused more on the specialty stuff, like creatures and weapons and armor. Uh-huh. So I guess one of the signature pieces I designed for the films was Orchrist, the sword.
Oh, cool.
Which was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And also just I spent a lot of time working on the elves, the different weapons and armor for the elves. I mean, what tended to happen is you just work across a lot of different stuff, and you know, some of it makes it into the film quite directly, and other times it's a very collaborative effect, and you know, you might have 4 or 5 of you just trying to solve one particular thing.
Uh-huh. Do you ever lean over to a friend in the middle of the movie and go, hey, I did the eyebrow guard on that helmet. That was me. You know?
You do. Yeah, it's quite weird. Like, you know, you get it, you know, obviously when the film's playing, everyone's following the action. Right. But after working on the film for so long, what I tend to end up doing is watching all the background stuff, because I'm trying to sort of see whether a few things that I designed for the background characters made it in.
That's awesome. That is so cool, Paul. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us here today. And one of the things I think that's fantastic, we're really looking forward to talking with Paul and several other folks from Weta here about giant killer robots. So we're going to get all into that.
And Cryptozoic.
And Cryptozoic, right.
And Cryptozoic. Don't forget those guys.
We should not, right? Because you guys are doing all the awesome visuals and story, and they're doing all the cool rules. So it's going to be a great conversation. Before we get to all that, though, we have
quite a team.
Right, we have the basics we got to get through the show here. So one thing, Craig, we just did another Lost Chapter. Met up in Dunkin' Donuts. If people want to get the lost chapters from us, what should they do?
The best way to get the Lost Chapters, Russ, is actually to become a Patreon supporter on Patreon. Become a patron of the D6 Generation.
There you go.
Go to the website, the d6generation.com. Look on the right-hand margin. You'll see the cool Patreon logo. You click on that. It'll bring you right through to that horrible video that Russ and I made. Skip that completely. Don't watch it at all, especially if you value your eyesight. And you can read up on what Patreon is. And basically, it's your way to support the show, become part of the show. You kick a little donation. If your donation per episode is $2 or more, you get access to the entire vault of the Lost Chapters. That's right. We've pioneered this entire economic model of giving you 4 hours every other week for free and then charging you for 30 minutes.
Exactly right. So what's the time now for, Craig?
Right now, it's probably time for Achievements in Gaming.
It is. And Achievements in Gaming, of course, is brought to you by all of our fine friends over at Patreon. So here's a part of the show. We like to go through all the things we've been playing lately. And so guests first here, Paul. Paul, what kind of games you've been playing lately? Either play testing, what are some tried and true favorites to make it to the table around your place? What have you been playing?
Or you said a lot about role-playing. What are you role-playing?
13th Age was the last game I played, which is a really fun high fantasy game that was developed by some of the folks that used to work at Wizards of the Coast. And in fact, my DM for the game actually is best friends with the guys that actually developed it up in Seattle. So
nice.
he was visiting from Seattle, so we got together for a bit of a reunion game, which was awesome.
Very cool. Any other non-RPGs make it to the table around there?
Definitely. I think Forbidden Desert for me has been a real good fun game.
Oh, nice.
I was a huge we obsessively played Pandemic, I have to say. It kind of took over our lives there when it first came out. And since then I've developed a real taste for co-op board games, and so someone suggested trying out Forbidden Desert. So we're playing a lot of that at the moment as well, which is a huge amount of fun. And then kind of on the more sort of fast-paced kind of, fun side of things, Kittens in a Blender.
Nice.
I bought for my nieces, so I enjoyed torturing them with that.
I know, right? My youngest daughter would be like, "No, don't put that." Yeah, she'd be very much against that sort of concept.
Yeah. Do you make the blending sound when you put like one of the favorite what's in?
Yes. Have you tried Exploding Kittens? That's another one that they don't like, but they love to play anyway because the cats explode.
I love that. I didn't play that. I only actually had my first game of that about 2 months ago, but it was a lot of fun. I can see why it was did as well as it did. I can see why it got kind of a legendary status.
Very good. So it sounds like you guys keep your hands quite in the gaming pot, which is awesome. Very good.
Yeah, busy.
Craig, how about yourself, sir? What have you been playing lately?
My 6-year-old son Reese and I have still continued getting. He keeps asking me to play games, and I will never say no to that. This week he wanted to play some fantasy, and he wanted to play Frostgrave again, which is a fun, fast game. And ironically, he said Frostgrave with the ship, which of course is the big medieval galleon that I designed and put together for my Frostgrave table with all the snow on it and everything. Which is a giant, enormous pain in the butt to bring up from the pub without, clashing its masts all over the place. So it's only on rare special occasions when I let him talk me into bringing that all the way upstairs to where we play games. But I decided that I would do that for him. So we set that all up. You can actually check the Twitter feed for a couple pictures because that was a really cool table that him and I put together with all the bits and pieces for that game. And so that was Frostgrave with a boat. And then I played Blood and Plunder. Finally, we got the game to the table.
Yes.
That is, of course, the Flintlock Games pirate game, which is a historical game, which Russ and I, unless you count Conflict 47, the Weird War 2 game, Russ and I are really not really historical guys. And yet we have stumbled into a historical game, Russ.
I really like Blood and Plunder. So we played our first game. I would have liked a few more boats, but
well, that's the ironic part. It was the pirate game with no boats.
I'm teasing Craig though because the game comes with boats.
Fantasy mini game with boat.
Yes.
Pirate game, no boat.
Right now, the game has boats. They have great models.
It has beautiful
Craig
boats.
has them.
I have several.
I was ribbing him because he hasn't painted them yet. But
yes.
Craig came with an amazing table laid out. It was like we were in a little Spanish village in the Caribbean someplace. And I got to play the pirates. He got to play the redcoats. And I like the mechanics. I like the pinning mechanic. I like the sort of leadership rules. I like the integrated turns. And I was able to jump out. The pistols work perfectly. If you timed everything right, your pistols can be really quite deadly. I like having to time the reloads. It makes you really feel like you are using flintlock-style weapons. A lot to like about this game. I think there's a lot going on here, Craig, and I'm looking forward to diving into it more as we get more of the bits of the game put together, ready to play.
Oh, me too. I thought there were a lot of innovative mechanisms that we were using. The card initiative system worked great. I love the fact that, and I only put this together as I was driving home last night, Russ. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that you were just shooting the crap out of me with your pistol troops. And I, like, psychologically, as they say, surprise is an event that takes place in the mind of the enemy. Well, I was surprised. Mm-hmm. I fell for a Russ mind trick, which I almost never do. So he looked at the table and went, shoot, so shooting's not going to be very effective in this game. And I went, it's not. Then I will charge my my freebooters right across this courtyard and get shot up.
Right.
But my militia guys, they're going to be okay. They're the old redcoats. They're going to get shot up. Yeah. Never thinking, Russ, that I could do the exact same thing to you without taking the -1 for pistols.
Yes, right.
But instead, I was constantly, no, I must stay and then go. And it was a classic blunder. I only can take some comfort knowing that generals throughout history have done exactly what I did last night.
Well, I would like to claim some kind of strategic brilliance, but actually its necessity was the mother of invention there. I realized quite quickly that pistols would be all but useless at over 4 inches. So I figured,
except for
unless I
your
was
commander who was able to snipe off one of my guys.
So unless I'm firing it within 4 inches, it didn't matter. So I was using all kinds of cool stuff there. And I used some of the tricks that I learned from my daughter playing her Kaya Circle of Orboros list about yo-yoing back and forth. And so there's some really cool. We'll get into that game more.
Yeah,
in the future,
because the way commanders work in that game, it's great.
You get a second move after you attack, which is pretty neat.
And that's me that's me for gaming, Russ. What about you?
Pretty much that covered me. Pretty much I've had a very busy couple of weeks, so Blood and Plunder was the only. Now I almost got to the table, and Paul, I don't know if you're a video game person at all, but I almost got some board games to the table, some new ones. I had Saloon Tycoon ready to go, and some other games with my daughters. But then, like For Honor, the beta for Honor came out this weekend, which is a huge medieval combat console PC game. And my daughters and I like medieval combat games, so we lost our weekend in that game. So I didn't get any more board games than I should have. But Paul, did you get a chance to try For Honor out at all? Is that your cup of tea?
No, I'm sort of more of a console, so PlayStation, and I'm on the sort of. I'm just over the halfway mark on Dishonored 2, which I'm loving.
Yeah, good. Yeah, my daughter got into the first Dishonored, but she never got into the second one. But yeah, For Honor's interesting. I think as someone who spent as much time in medieval combat, even though it's fantasy, as you have, you might want to check it out, because what's interesting about For Honor is it's not just run up, mash the button, and kill a guy. Like, you have to block the correct side against the way the guy's attacking you. So you're actually, like, watching your opponent's movements and deciding. And if he's using a mace, it's very different than if he's using a samurai sword. It's very different than if he's a Viking. So the fighting styles are reasonably authentic, and you can block with your shield properly. You can push. There's a really interesting combat going on there. That's pretty impressive stuff. So I'm still not sure how I feel about it, because it makes the combat very complex in your head. So it's a whole different mind change, because I kind of want to Assassin's Creed it and just kind of run in and kill everything, and you can't really do it that way. You got to actually run in, watch your opponent, pause. If two guys are on you at once, it's really bad. So it's a very interesting, very whole new way to do medieval combat in a video game. Very interesting idea.
So do you think that they've actually gone to Western martial art trainers and actually really tried to build a very authentic fighting system?
They're somewhere in there, because they yes, except they had to keep it relatively simple to make it playable, right? So
sure.
But I think there's only three ways you got to really block. There's up, left, or right? But then there's all kinds of combos you can do, and the more you practice. But there's interesting subtleties, like the heavy hitters can hold their block longer than the light and fast dudes, but the light and fast dudes can strike like 3 times faster. So it's really, there's a lot going on in this game. I think it's worth checking out, because the system seems really simple, but the more you learn, the more you realize there's a lot more to it than you thought. So it's interesting. It feels pretty realistic. You'd probably, given the movies you've worked on in the past, you probably would really appreciate it and spot a lot more of the realism than I would. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
We would actually train. I used to do Western martial arts, because I figured if I was going to design armor and weapons, that I should actually have an understanding of how they actually work in the real world. So I'm not a particularly big guy. And so not really a trained fighter. And so for a couple of years, I managed to hang in there, getting the crap beaten out of me. But it was a very educational experience, and I took what I learned and applied it to what, when we design for film, just to sort of get that input. But I think what you're talking about sounds more where I'm at these days.
Mm-hmm. It feels like, I think there was mocap involved and everything else, because it looks like they really thought a lot of that through, right? That this was something that was really important to them. So it's not, I don't know if it's definitely not hyper accurate, but there was a very lot of work on making it feel reasonably accurate, right? So
I think it's an awesome idea.
Yeah, it's cool. I would definitely check it out. I think, given your background, I think you might find it fascinating. So what about modeling? Have you guys built any models lately? Or I'm sure, Paul, you're probably doing 3D models all day long. But how about you, Paul? What have you built or painted or digitally built lately?
At the moment, I'm just undertaking Slave 1. I've got one of the Bandai Slave 1 kits. Oh, yeah, nice. And I'm literally just in the process of busting it out of the box and getting it prepared for assembling. And then straight after that, I've got the Millennium Falcon. I've had a bit of a Star Wars renaissance since watching Rogue One. Nice. So I've got my Star Wars back on again. So
I know, right? How good was that
in terms of modeling, that's what I'm working up at the moment.
Awesome. Now how typically do you do like model kit builds pretty frequently? Is this something you're doing like once a month or so, or how many models do you build typically?
Not as much actually. Most of my spare time I'm actually painting, like oil painting or drawing, because I'm more of a 2D artist at Weta. More recently, I've started learning 3D. It's kind of a important tool to know. But I got over the last couple of years at Christmas time, I've been getting model kits from my brother-in-law, who's a big modeler. And so that's kind of got me back into it, and I've been slowly getting more ambitious every year. So now I'm sort of tackling the Bandai kits now.
Oh, very cool, very cool. I'd love it. Given your painting background, I can only imagine what your Slave One looks like. That must be a pretty awesome paint job.
I'll probably cheat it and I'll sneak it. Most of what the guys do here is we'll build stuff and then we'll take it into the paint shop. And we'll ask one of the guys in paint shop to do the most amazing paint job on it, because that's always the hardest thing to get right. So I cheat pretty much.
Wow. Okay.
You heard it here, folks.
There it is. Awesome.
All you need is the Weta Workshop paint shop.
Right. I'm just going to go bout back and that's awesome.
No offense. That does seem a bit like cheating.
It does.
It kind of is, to be honest. It really is.
Awesome.
Wow.
Well, what about you, Craig? Have you taken anything to, like ILM or anything? For you?
Well, I don't have access to Weta, the workshop or the paint shop, but I did struggle through in preparation for our game of Blood and Plunder. I painted about 28 British Caribbean militia and several different commanders. So I knew Russ would want an option. And if he was going to play pirates, he wouldn't want a red coat.
Got to be pirates.
So, So I painted up 4 different commanders. I painted up Henry Morgan and the 2 different variations that came in the Kickstarter. And then I painted up 2 generic British commanders, but with cool, flamboyant color schemes. And then 24 militia. So 24 militia came out to be several different freebooter. I think 8 freebooters, 12 actual militiamen, the redcoats, and 4 sea dogs. All of which then proceeded to kick my butt last night.
Nice.
And then I'm not going to tell right now, but my other secret project is on hold, of course.
Boat.
What?
Boat. Paint a boat, man.
Boat. Yes, exactly. That's why. But I do have a super special secret piratey terrain project that I've started working on that I found online that I'm going to try to adapt and work on myself. So that's I have all of the pieces. I've collected all the pieces and I'm in the process of now putting those together. That's me. What about you, Russ?
Very little, again, due to For Honor. However, I did manage to prime all the little troll bloods that go on top of my troll blood war wagon. So I am very close to being done with my troll blood war wagon. And tomorrow night, my favorite local miniature gaming store is moving. Adler Hobby's changing locations, so my daughter and I won't go out to game there. Instead, we're going to be assembling our Colossals and Gargants. So really excited to begin working on those. Those are the giant guys in the War Machine and Hordes universe. So we're looking forward to putting those together. So that's on the table. What about other geeky goodness? This is books, TV shows, movies. Paul, what have you been watching or reading lately?
Watching wise, I just finished Westworld.
Oh, nice.
Which kind of blew my brain.
Right?
It was one of the best shows I've seen in a long time. And also Dirk Gently. I'm on a bit of a Netflix binge at the moment, so we're sort of plowing through that.
How far are you through Dirk Gently? We just got through episode 4, I think.
I've gone right through the whole lot.
What did you think? So no spoilers, because I'm only through episode 4. But are you? I've been really impressed by it. How have you felt about it? Are you a big Douglas Adams fan, or does it ring true?
Yeah, I grew up reading those books, and I'm a big fan. And I was surprised. It was a book that I didn't think they would ever make into a TV series.
Right.
And I was quite surprised at how good they've done it. It's been a really great job. And to be honest, it was kind of a guilty pleasure to see Elijah in such a fun role. I mean, he's such a nice guy. We've met him, obviously met him quite a bit and hung out a wee bit. And it's quite cool to sort of see him in such a different role. And I just thought he nailed it.
That's the cool thing, because I was worried, because you're right. I think the Dirk Gently's books are almost a harder, given how the format of the storytelling works in those books, really hard to do in this medium. and given also how they've really never really gotten Hitchhiker's Guide really right, but to have this done so well, I was really impressed with. We're really enjoying it. My whole family's enjoying it. My daughters, who are 13 and 14, are loving it. My wife's loving it. We're enjoying it as a family. It's been a great show.
Yeah, no, I think I just can't believe how good some of the TV shows coming through at the moment are.
Yeah,
and it's
right.
kind of interesting. Obviously, I spend a lot of time in film, but I have to admit I'd love to be working on some of these TV series. It's just they're just such a pleasure to watch.
Did you watch, speaking of crazy good effects, did you see Series of Unfortunate Events? The Netflix series there where they did...
Absolutely, yeah.
The effects in that were awesome, right? I mean, wow.
Oh, I loved it. And it was interesting because I started realizing they were using miniatures a lot.
Yes, I thought that too, right?
Which was so cool. It's just to make that decision to actually use miniatures when they could have just used, digital matte painting.
Right.
So I loved how they played that show out. I mean, I really love the books as well, actually. But, comparing the film to the TV series, it was kind of interesting seeing the differences that they made and then the similarities.
Right. Great stuff. Any books you're reading?
At the moment, no, not so much. I'm actually, but I don't get to bed till pretty late because I'm either up painting or working on my own games. And so by the time I crawl into bed, it's pretty late. And at the moment, I haven't really quite got around to hitting a big juicy book up. I'll have to wait for my holiday in Japan for that, I think.
All right, that's fair. Cool. Well, Craig,
We'll allow it.
Craig, how about you, sir? What have you been watching and reading?
Well, I a new show just started up, APB. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not.
No.
APB is basically it reminds me a lot of kind of like the backstory of RoboCop. So it would sort of tie in with a little bit with Giant Killer Robots, although there have not yet been any Giant Killer Robots, to be fair. Basically, the premise is a Tony Stark kind of guy. Okay, or maybe even not even that. Maybe more like a Bill Gates kind of guy. He's like a genius inventor, but he's very flighty. So he'll be like, "Oh, flight is awesome," and he's gonna like focus on drone technology, and then he gets bored with that. And then he's like, "Oh, rockets are awesome," so then he advances rocket technology. Then he gets bored with that. And he and his best friend, who is also the CFO of his company, are driving through a really bad part of town, and he decides that he needs a cigarette because everything's falling apart, even though he's quit smoking. So he goes in to get a single cigarette, which is a funny scene. But then there's a robbery. This is all in the first few minutes of the thing, and his best friend is shot. And the cops won't do anything about it. They can't. They're like, this is Chicago. Everything's a mess anyway. It's all falling apart. There's nothing we can do. And so he goes in and he finds out the financial weaknesses of the mayor's office and leverages those to be able to buy basically or rent control of the police department for a year to prove that he can do it better than the city is doing it. And so he immediately upgrades all of their all of their technology, and he starts using these awesome drones. And he's a tinkerer, so every time there's a weakness, he comes up with he's like working on his drones late at night to make them better. So it's a really cool cop show, but it's like this near future kind of thing where they're trying to solve this one crime, but in the process, they're solving these other crimes, and it brings in all these other cool little social things. It was real. I've only seen the first episode, and there's only been 2 episodes released, but I thought it was really cool. It was really neat. Cool. So I would recommend you check that out.
All right.
Is that the guy from Weeds, the guy Andy from Weeds is the lead star on that? I
think so. I do think so.
He's quite an interesting actor, quite quirky.
Yeah, he's kind of like low energy for this kind of role, but in the first episode it worked enough that I was like, okay, I'll buy it. But yeah, I recommend. I'm going to give it a shot anyway, or keep trying to let it go. Saw the Lego Batman. Anybody else see the Lego Batman?
Not yet.
Oh yes,
Crickets. It was good. It was, it's never going to live quite up to the first Lego movie, but it was very amusing. It's hilarious if you're a fan of Batman through the ages, because there are lots of inside jokes about all the different time periods of Batman and all the different movie styles and everything. So it's in that way, it's very similar to the Lego movie, where it's a lot of humor there for kids, but also for, grown-ups our age. And then watching The Abyss season 2. So far, so good. Russ, have you been catching up with that?
No, I've not.
You have not. Yes, season 2 started a couple weeks ago.
The Abyss.
Yeah, it's super exciting.
You mean Expanse?
The Expanse. What did I say?
The Abyss. The Abyss is old. The Expanse. Yes.
Sorry, I meant The Expanse.
Yes, I'm watching The Expanse.
I wrote the wrong thing.
Got it.
Yeah. So have you? So you've been with that then?
Yeah, Paul. Did you watch the season 1 of Expanse?
Actually, it's on my to-do. I actually worked on it, but I haven't quite got ready.
Okay,
Paul, could you please just stop dropping names? Seriously.
That's awesome, Paul.
That's crazy.
We don't normally work on TV shows, and but we connected with the writers, the co-writers of it, and they wrote the books, and they were big fans, and we ended up just sort of hitting it off, and they started coming through to us, and we only worked on it at the very, very beginning, and it's kind of more sort of conceptual stage before they actually got a sort of like went into production. So a lot of the work that we did kind of was setting the scene, but a lot of the stuff we did didn't end up into the final TV show. I have read the first book and loved it, and I've seen probably most of the first episode, but I just realized that I needed to give myself some peace and quiet and just sit and watch it properly rather than trying to draw and paint and watch at the same time.
Yeah, it's the kind of show you can't look away from. There's so much good visuals on there. It's a great show.
Yeah,
I love
awesome story. Yeah.
Good stuff.
It's got everything going for it, and the books are phenomenal.
And we should say that our friend of the show, Jeff Engelstein, just announced he's working on a board game for The Expanse. That's just been disclosed. So very exciting.
Nothing not cool about that.
Yeah, right. So lots of cool Expanse stuff happening in the near future. Yeah.
And speaking of The Expanse, I'm re-listening to the latest 2 novels. Nemesis Games is the first of the new kind of story arc, and I'm just these guys. They're good the first time through. The second time through, you can just tell they're even better because there's all kinds of stuff I didn't notice or things that tie into the former books or the book that's coming. And I mean, it's just, it's genius. It's so well put together. It's so tightly plotted. The characters are so awesome. I just continue loving it. And of course I'm re-listening to it because I have it all on Audible.
Nice. Yeah. And if you want to get your own free books on Audible, head on over to our website and click on the Audible link in the upper right-hand corner to get all the great information there.
Indeed.
Anything else, Craig?
I've been reading a lot of books of miniature skirmish rules, as I mentioned last time in Did You Ever Notice? And I'll just say I'm still reading those and still on that same road. I don't know why I'm fascinated by all of a sudden by these small publishing companies skirmish rules, but I'm still On Guard, Super System, Rogue Stars, and of course Frostgrave led the way for me. And that's me. What about you, Russ?
Well, I don't have much to add, but Paul, you'd mentioned all the great shows on Netflix. I want to add one more I started watching, the Santa Clarita Diet. Have you guys heard of this show?
No.
So, Paul, have you heard of this one?
I've seen it. I'm just trying to work out whether I want to watch it or not because the concept's pretty gory.
The concept is crazy, but the casting is amazing. So it stars Drew Barrymore and what's the gentleman's name? Timothy Olyphant. The guy from
Love him.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So he and she are a great chemistry, and so the premise of this show is it is a sitcom, and they are realtors in like normal everyday life, and they're doing realtor things. But right in the very first episode, strange things start to happen to Drew Barrymore's character, and she all of a sudden essentially. Starts to sort of, she's still alive, but she's apparently dying at the same time. Like her heart stops beating, but she's still walking around. Like she's fine, but she just can't feel her heartbeat anymore. And come to find out, she starts to like crave meat. But all of a sudden raw meat's better than regular meat. And all of a sudden that's not really doing it anymore. And really, maybe a little live flesh would be better. And maybe some live animal. You know what? Maybe some human flesh would be. And so it's dealing with this situation. What makes the show work so far, we're about like 4 episodes in now, is the actors are fantastic, the chemistry is fantastic, the casting and the cameos are amazing, like Nathan Fillion's in episode 1. Just a lot of great stuff happening there. I would highly recommend, each is a half an hour show, they're short, or 20 minutes because they, the Netflix and the commercials in them. So watch one. I think you'll be hooked after episode 1. My wife and I are totally into it. It's a little gross, but not like Game of Thrones gross. It's just got just enough in there to make you feel like you're in that world of yes, my wife's becoming some sort of thing. We don't know if she's becoming a zombie or a vampire or something else. We don't know, but something strange is definitely happening there. And what's great is they have a daughter who's about 15, and their neighbor has a super nerdy son who's obviously a total D&D nerd. He's got his D20 t-shirt on and everything. And so he's like diagnosing her and like going through like the monster manual, figuring all this stuff out. It's kind of funny. So there's some good stuff happening there. It's worth watching. So check out the Santa Clarita Diet if you're looking for something a little crazy to watch.
Awesome.
It sounds interesting.
And that's achievements. And, the rest of the show here, we're going to have a bunch of people coming in. That's going to be like a revolving door from Weta Workshop. Very exciting. So, Paul, we may need to be able to get close to you again later this episode. If people want to keep track of what you're up to, either your Twitter account or what you're doing, where can they find you on the internet?
Basically, just search under Paul Tobin Artist or Paul Tobin Weta, and I've got a website, Twitter. Obviously, if you want to follow what we're doing with the game, with GKR, Giant Killer Robots, then I think the best place to go through to is our Facebook page. I mean, pretty much everything that you need to know is going to go up there. And then obviously once we launch the Kickstarter, there'll be a bunch of really cool videos going up there, really delving into the game and also the world as well.
Awesome. So we'll be back shortly to talk more with Paul and other folks from Weta about the game and also the cool sculpts and the models in there as well. But first, we're going to hear from some other folks, and I've got to go click light on a particular Facebook page. And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present... Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep. Seriously, Wakeland, I used to have my own segment, and now I'm relegating to announcing this pap. Hey, you're lucky we still use you. Hey, and welcome to another App of the Ep. This time around, I want to talk about a little iOS title I've been playing lately. Great little puzzler called Splitter Critters. And this is one of those games where you don't really control the main characters. So instead, you have these little creatures, critters, if you will, that are trying to get across the map. So on one side, you have the creature, and the other side is a set of platforms and other obstacles. And then there's a little spaceship, and you're trying to get your little critter into the spaceship. Now, nothing super unique about this. There's been dozens or hundreds of these sorts of things, kind of like cut the rope on other stuff. What makes this one interesting is the mechanic of the splitting. So essentially what you do is you swipe across the screen pretty much at an angle, and the angle you swipe at rips the background image as if it was a sheet of paper, just rips it. It even has a little, sort of like a little fraying graphics, which is pretty cool. So I can rip the entire map horizontally, vertically, or at some diagonal angle I choose. And what's really interesting is once you rip it, you can then slide the ripped piece up or down, which allows you to really change how the map is oriented. So if your creature's on a platform and you slice it in such a way that it slices the platform at a diagonal and you slide it up with the creature on it, now the creature's just moved up to the next platform, if that makes sense. So it's pretty interesting, and there are different ways you can slice. And there's different interesting effects when you slice. For example, water does some interesting things. Different kinds of terrain do interesting things. You can swipe multiple times, creating multiple cuts. And then as the game progresses, there are different kinds of creatures that do different things. So some of these creatures that move have different effects on other creatures. There are then little obstacle creatures that move around. You have to kind of contain them with your slicing. Really interesting little puzzler, really clever level design, and I really like the mechanic of slicing, and it definitely gets you thinking outside the box. So if you're looking for a nice little time waster, a great little puzzle game, you like those, definitely check out Splitter Critters. Also great for the kids because it really gets some problem solving as well. So Splitter Critters on iOS. Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the Ep, a segment in which, hey, less of that, more just getting on with the show. Seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. And we are super excited to be talking to today Paul Tobin, senior concept designer and one of the lead creative minds behind the world of giant killer robots at Weta, and Matt Hyra, another one of the main game designers for the game. And we're going to hear all about this game and the universe that it populates right now. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you very much.
And first, let's talk a little bit about I'm assuming you guys are designing games. We're assuming you guys are gamers. Should we just go with that assumption?
I think that's
since age 10 and designing them for many years too. So.
Excellent. Matt, why don't we start with you? Just a little bit of an origin story, if you will. How are you now, or have you ever been a gamer?
Oh gosh, yes. Started out at age 10 with some D&D and went through all the role playing and Car Wars and Call of Cthulhu and everything, and then eventually got a little more into trading card games and then board games, and I was designing them on my own, and then eventually got hired at Wizards of the Coast, worked there for 7 years, worked at Upper Deck for 7 years, and now I've been at Cryptozoic for, I think it's been 7 years, so a bit of a pattern.
There's a pattern there. 777.
I'm going to be here for a while.
Excellent. And so. Oh, good. We hope so. Yes,
right, because 7's coming up again. It sounds like, which could be dangerous if you learned anything from that comment.
And Paul, what about you?
Actually, weirdly enough, a little bit similar. Like Matt, I started off with D&D. I was a huge, and still am a huge role-playing game gamer, and then sort of got into board games as well. Trading card games, particularly Magic, was the sort of the drug of choice for quite a long time. And then I sort of drifted more into obviously film and television. So I didn't really do a lot of game design at all. Probably more recently, in the last couple of years, I have actually started working on computer games, and that has involved a little bit of game design. So it's that's sort of been my sort of interest in games. And I suppose for me, probably the last 5 years, I've really got back into board games in a big way.
Nice.
Excellent. Cool.
Well, so let's get right into this. So whose fault is this? Who woke up one day and was like, you know what we need? We need a game about giant killer robots.
Well, I think actually the person whose fault it was actually a guy called Mike Gonzalez who worked at Weta Workshop, and he actually had some friends with another company called Trigger who wanted to do a game on giant killer robots, and they were an augmented reality company wanting to get into games. And so, ironically, this whole partnership actually was born out of another company coming to us asking if we could build this world, and then, by extension, Cryptozoic got involved. So we actually blame Mike Gonzalez, and I'm very glad for it.
Nice. And so Matt, how did you get sort of sucked into this whole thing?
Right. Well, when I, heard this plan of, okay, we got this great world and we got this augmented reality dream that we want to do, and now we actually need to put some mechanics to it, and that's when Cryptozoic got involved, and me specifically. I've done miniatures games in the past, and I've done giant robot games in the past, so apparently I was a pretty good fit for the job.
Nice. And so, awesome. what sort of was the impetus for like the world then? So it sounds like the world itself came first, and then it was find someone amazing like Matt who can help us make awesome rules around the world. Is that sort of the order of operation?
Yeah, that is kind of how it kicked off. The Trigger didn't really have the reason why they turned to us is they didn't actually have any kind of world idea. That's something that they wanted us to bring to the picture. So. How it sort of kicked off is we just decided to start ripping into it treating it very much like a film property, actually, where we just started to try to work out what kind of world we want to set it in, what are the sort of storytelling opportunities. And so we took quite a cinematic approach to it. And I think for us, though, the main thing we were wanting to try to achieve, the giant robot genre is very well established. Mm-hmm. And I guess for us, it was about trying to come up with an original take on that and sort of avoid some of the common sort of tropes that you get with those kind of games and those kind of worlds. And then I guess from there, once we kind of got a fairly good we literally locked ourselves in a room for a week. And at the end of the week, we had enough to go with to then sort of bat it over to Matt And then really, I think we were just really interested to see what Matt could do. I mean, we weren't at that stage. We were certainly not interested in sort of coming up with game design suggestions so much. So we just handed over what we thought was some opportunities within the world, and then just let Matt and the guys at Cryptozoic run with it.
So what was your elevator pitch to Matt? I mean, how did you pitch this to Matt? Like, not in, hey, Matt, can you make another giant robot game that the world needs? Or who was the like, no, this one's going to be really different. How did you guys pitch this?
God, I'm trying to remember how did we pitch it?
Well, what got you excited,
Matt?
Matt?
We actually sent through we sent through some artwork, and we sent through treatment.
Right,
and also
right.
We just did some meetings as well, which I think, I don't know if there was an elevator pitch. It was more us just throwing stuff out and just sort of seeing if anything stuck.
Right. It started as a world, and the whole hyper consumer kind of reality TV show aspect of it kind of got a little got me going, because it was a unique take on that. With I got to put in there's some jokes, in some of the weapon names and things like that, and so it was a new opportunity.
Cool. And after you heard the pitch, Matt, what was in your mind? What were sort of some of the essential? Did you start getting ideas for like essential mechanics that would make Giant Killer Robots the game feel like Giant Killer Robots the game?
Yeah, one thing about the mechs is they are kind of like weapon platforms more than anything else. They're not. It's not. You don't have like missiles firing, coming out of every orifice, and giant, guns that are of one particular type. So when I saw it, these things are like, oh, you can actually add on different weapons to this thing. So that got me thinking that we wanted to make these very customizable. Okay, so you decide what is in that giant tube that guy's holding, right? Mm-hmm. And so that led to some design choices around, primary and secondary weapons, and then, additional things that your mech can do, and also the whole drones. That was a new take as well, of having one star of the show mech, the heavy hitter, mm-hmm. and then there's also combat support drones, repair drones, and recon drones. So I thought that was a good take too.
Now, is it sort of like a classic miniature game where there's a sort of a pre-game element where you're building your list and customizing your robot, or does that happen in game? Are you actually adapting and changing your loadout while you play?
You're not. You do build up your 25 card heavy hitter deck at the start of the game prior to playing, and you do that in secret so that you have some surprises to spring on your opponent. Nice. Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I was just some of the things you were mentioning, Matt. I think you were asking about kind of like the elevator pitch. I guess, as I said before, we were treating it very much like a film project, and so from the way we approach it in film is essentially we're creating the core heroes of the world, and in this particular case, we actually started with the factions rather than the pilots, and so pretty much the first thing that we tried to block out, which obviously we wanted to then hand over to Matt so that he could bounce around with, was developing 4 factions that had unique corporate backgrounds and distinctive design based around each one of those factions, and so that they were readily identifiable and basically hopefully had enough. The other thing too is the designers that were involved in this, our take on sort of design for this kind of world is kind of grounded quite heavily in reality. So we never wanted to pursue kind of like a Transformers style robot on robot kind of game. We would definitely, in fact, that's one of the things we talked to Matt about quite early on, was that we were less interested in seeing 2 big robots physically fighting it out in melee combat. We were much more interested in treating them, as Matt was saying, as like weapon platforms, where they're stalking through these ruined cities, launching a range of weapons against each other. So they really are much more kind of grounded in reality, rather than kind of that kind of overt, complex Transformers, everything's moving kind of thing.
Oh, very cool. So, Matt, did you have a lot of room to kind of maneuver here on the factions? It almost sounds like, Paul, you kind of gave Matt sort of the high-level ideas of the factions, and Paul, the other way around. Paul, you gave me the high level, and Matt, you were able to get in and really think about how their play styles for each of the factions, or how much room did you have, Matt, on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, a lot of room, and the actual faction work they had done inspired me to make each of the different factions feel differently and have different kind of weapon loadouts and different tactics and whatnot. So, things like the Thunder Happy, they're big into missiles just because that was part of their corporate background, and the King Wolf, I kind of took that wolf theme and it's kind of a stalking style of play. So I took those themes and I definitely ran with them, and I mean, based on what they had done, and I came back with my take on it, and it was a great marriage.
Awesome. So
very cool.
I'd agree. Actually, I think we're certainly very big on a collaborative approach. And I think that what tended to happen is we would suggest something, then Matt would go away, run with it, come back with stuff, and then we would incorporate that back into the story and world, either at literally a design level. So Matt would come up with a really cool weapon, and we would actually then go away and design that weapon, model it up, and attach it to the jicker that we designed. Or even thematically, if Matt was coming up with cool backstory ideas, we would try to then build that into this sort of storytelling aspect of it as well. So it's not like we just locked stuff down from the start. It was very much kind of an organic evolution process.
That's awesome. I think it's important to have the designer be able to get feedback into the. I think that's a fantastic relationship. So first of all, I'm thrilled because as Craig and I have talked many times on the show before about new miniature games, and we have this rule of 4 on the D6 generation where if a new miniature game can't get the 4 factions relatively quickly, it will fail. This is just like a running theory we have. So the fact that you guys are hitting the ground running with 4,
the obvious exception being X-Wing.
Yes, well, X-Wing's the exception that proves the rule.
Or any Star Wars.
Anything
property.
Star Wars, pretty much.
Yes, they have an advantage.
Right. They have a brand recognition thing.
Yeah,
they a bit of a leg up there.
To be fair with Weta, Lord of the Rings is in a similar place. But in any other case, can you guys give us, let's get our listeners a little excited here. Can you give us sort of the high level, can you describe the universe really briefly, and let's talk a little about the factions?
I'll do my best to just give a very high level sort of look into the world. So effectively, there's been an apocalypse, which is obviously a fairly common trope. But instead of the whole world basically turning into a very drab and dystopian future, what actually happened was humanity rallied, and actually, even though a huge amount of the population died, things managed to get back onto an even footing and start to rebuild society, and I guess in a more brighter way. And basically, the corporations were the ones that ironically saved the day. And because there was such a depletion of workforce, I guess, and because so many of the cities, our current cities, were left depleted, they turned to robotic workforce to start to dismantle our old cities, to rebuild just a few mega cities effectively to house the population that now exists on the planet. And so that's how we sort of justified such a huge focus on robots and how important they are in society. And then from the corporate point of view, that these corporations, there's no nations anymore. There is just corporations. And we're a really big fan of all those kind of 80s films like RoboCop and Starship Troopers, those kind of tongue-in-cheek dystopian kind of films which take a bit of a tongue-in-cheek look at consumer culture. And so we definitely wanted to inject a lot of humor into this. We don't want this to be kind of a Terminator 2 post-apocalyptic kind of world, but something that's got a lot of humor to it and a lot of color. And so that's kind of where things got to. And then in terms of how the game part of it works is being smart corporations who want to keep their consumer base happy, they effectively started turning this demolition party, which was basically demolishing all of our cities for scrap. They decided to turn that into a huge sporting event, which is basically the biggest thing on the planet, just like football or, gridiron or Formula One or baseball, any of those kind of obsessive sports that people follow. It's that kind of idea. Everyone lives and breathes GKR. And then the other aspect of it is a reality TV show which follows the trials and tribulations of the pilots, because the pilots are kind of like highly sought after individuals that basically work their way up the league and are bid on by the different corporations. And so that's the kind of world that this kind of game is taking place in.
Oh, very cool. And so Matt, what are some of the core mechanics that support that? I mean, is it you mentioned a deck of cards? Is it mostly card driven? Is there a dice component? What did you want the essentials of how the gameplay would feel like to be?
Sure. Well, for the customization of your jickers, we definitely wanted to do cards because that's just a very easy way to do it. And the 25 cards you choose for your faction deck make up that is your heavy hitter, and those are your hit points. When you take damage, you're actually taking damage to systems like weapon systems. You basically are losing cards. Now you can look at that pile of damage and see what's there, but your opponent won't know. And when you repair, you actually can repair specific systems and get those back in your deck to get those things back online. So that is a fun thing. If your opponent might not even know that you've lost all of your primary weapon and are just working on secondaries only. So I would guess that would be the main.
Well, that's
deck
very
building
cool.
part.
I love the idea that there's sort of like your deck is your hit points, but also you're getting battlefield degradation as you play. Right, things are stopping working. That's neat.
That's true. That's true. There is also Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Oh, sorry, Matt. I was just gonna say that game design feature you came up with was such a huge breakthrough, I think, for the whole game itself. And I think it's really interesting. Like when we took the game on the road, and we play tested this game a lot, and one of the things that people just kept coming back to was just how clever and original that concept was, and just that idea of attrition. And losing systems was such a fun thing. So it was a really big breakthrough.
Cool. Yeah, and if further answer your question, yes, there are dice. There's to hit rolls, and there are damage rolls. As damage defenses. These robots can take a punch, let's put it that way, or I should say a hit. They're not really punching. One quick one. Hey, Paul, I know this has gone back and forth so many times. Are we calling it a miniatures game or a miniatures board game? Because I know it's switched about 3 or 4 times so far. Where are we right now?
I think we're still calling it a tabletop. Yeah, it's not I don't think we're calling it a miniatures game, but I think
okay.
Yeah, it's quite. I think the way that we've described it to ourselves, anyway, is it is quite an interesting entry point into miniatures games. Mm-hmm. But for us, I still feel like it's not a full-on sort of miniatures game, in my opinion, anyway.
Uh-huh.
Right.
So it takes place on a board?
Definitely.
Yes. Yep. Yes. There is a battle board. You set it up ahead of time, customizable with buildings, 3D buildings that you'll be able to put together and talk about systems breaking down. You can actually salvage the buildings during game to try to do a little area control victory. So it's not just blow up the other guy. You can also play a little more cat and mouse and tag buildings with your sponsors' advertisements. And once you've tagged 4 of the 6 sides of these hexagonal bases, the building is salvaged, and you score the point. You score that for an area control. And if you can knock down 4 buildings, salvage 4 buildings, that's an alternate victory condition.
Oh,
so,
nice. So are there missions or just multiple paths to victory? Is it sort of like a victory point game? You can also wipe the other guy out. You can grab the objectives. Is it kind of a multiple ways?
Not missions. Yeah, your mission is either shoot them up or tag them out. So two ways to win basically.
Nice. And one other thing you guys had hinted at, and we'll be talking to some other folks later about the model design and the sculpting and all that stuff. But is this when you mentioned it being a miniature game, do you consider this a hobby game? Does everything come pre-assembled, pre-painted? Is there some assembly required? Or where is it going to fall on that spectrum?
Everything comes fully assembled and fully painted.
Oh, okay, great.
Nice.
So basically, everything you need is in the box and ready to go. The only assembling you actually need to do is, as Matt just mentioned, was just assembling the sort of the 3D buildings themselves.
So it's very much like a board game in that, just like any board game, you lay the board out, you do the shuffle the cards, you do all the pre set up stuff. but it's got the added experience of it's a really cool board game with amazing bling because you got full size. How big roughly is your average giant killer robot?
They're about the size of an iPhone.
Okay.
I'm just looking at my iPhone right now, and I'm thinking it's about the right height. So they're about, I'm guessing, probably, I'm going to do it in centimeters, but about 15 centimeters high.
Is that a 7 Plus or a 7? For iPhone size. I'm just trying to,
Matt? I'm sorry.
Ignore him. He's just trying to be difficult.
I'm making a terrible joke. That's what's happening here.
But but I think that's one of the big things, that it's a giant killer robot game, and so we were really keen. I think that was one of the biggest opportunities we saw from a game design point of view and a game manufacture point of view was the chance to actually do some really big, beautiful miniatures. And so that for us was, because we've done collectibles at Weta for years. We've done a lot of collectibles. And I guess for us, this was a chance to take all of what we've learned doing really high-end collectibles, like we did the District 9 mech, and we built a whole bunch of bits and pieces for directors over the years, like the mech and Chappie as well. So we took a lot of the tech side of things that we'd learned on that in the manufacture and have now sort of brought it to bear on this particular game. So I'd say in comparison to a lot of other tabletop games, I would say a lot of the pieces are much, much larger scale. Yeah. And we've certainly got a lot of detail in there.
Yeah, Craig
judging from the way they looked, I know that they're like sort of demo versions that you brought to Gen Con and all over the West Coast over the spring and summer. Is the final, they're going to be painted and everything? Are they going to have all those cool logos and everything on them too?
Yes, they do come fully painted, and they do come with the faction logos on them as well. Yeah,
that's awesome. Now we're talking about all these robots, and I know a couple of the emails that flew back and forth, and from watching the demos at Gen Con, each faction has a few different kinds of robots at their disposal as they play through the game, right?
That's right. Yeah, each of the factions has their own unique set of drones. So a unique combat drone, unique repair drone, and unique recon drone. They all have a little bit different abilities and a little bit different weapons. So, yeah, it will feel different whenever you're playing a different faction.
Very cool.
Yep.
And I know that one of the guys in the office was mentioning that something that hasn't come up. So everybody looks different. And the recons, those are the small little drones, right?
Right.
And every faction's, like every model for every faction is completely different. They're totally different designs and sort of different aesthetics that you can see behind their general plan, I think.
Yeah, in terms of the design, oh, sorry, Matt. In terms of the design, every one of them is a completely unique design. So there's no, in fact, every robot in the box is effectively a unique one-off design. There's no multiples of the same design. I also, because we really wanted to make each of the factions really clearly identifiable and have their own kind of story, I guess, and have the design reflect their background and where they've come from. That was a big part of making sure that they were all unique. And I guess, ironically, one of the biggest reasons why all of the factions have such a unique look to them, because they're very brightly coloured, have quite bold graphic design on them, that actually came out of one of the augmented reality requirements of the time when we were still pursuing augmented reality as a thing for the game. We needed to actually be able to come up with a design that was trackable. And so we actually had to have graphic design elements on each of the heavy hitters that could be tracked. And that gave them a very signature look. And I think that's something that certainly makes, I think when I look at a lot of the other robot designs out there, and there's plenty, it certainly makes these ones look quite different. I mean, Matt, you should probably talk a little bit more perhaps to the sort of variety within the factions at a game design level.
Right. So when Paul says they're a unique design, he means the look of them. As the gameplay goes, they're also different. Perhaps the repair drones are kind of samey, but the combat and recon are definitely different. There's different weapon systems like ballistic, energy, and missile, different line of sight distances on these things. And they do have consistent armor at each of the levels. But yeah, the weapons and ranges and things like that are different across all the factions. So
that's awesome. Did you mention augmented reality, Paul? Was that something you guys were toying with? Is that going to be part of this experience?
Yeah, it was. As I said to you right at the beginning, the company that actually kicked all of this off, even at the very initial phases, was a company called Trigger, and they specialized in augmented reality. And actually, like Weta, they did a lot of service work in the film industry, and so. They weren't game designers, but they obviously had aspirations to do games, and they were wanting to do a augmented reality board game, which was, I know that there's a couple of examples in the market out there, but it's still a relatively sort of new idea, I guess, in some ways. And we actually pursued augmented reality for quite a long time in terms of the game design process and the world design process. I mean, certainly I think one of the challenges Matt had was some of the technology chain, the augmented technology challenges that he had to grapple with to come up with a game design that would work for the technology. Having said that, once we sort of got further down the road and we started doing a lot more play testing with the community, we started to kind of feel that the augmented reality experience was getting in the way of just having a good, fun game. And so ultimately we just made the decision that we prefer to just make a really great board game versus, so we just decided to listen to what people were telling us and we just decided that was something that we might look at in the future. But for now, we just want to build a really great game.
Cool. It's probably a smart call. It's a poor product manager that doesn't listen to consumer testing. So, well, let me ask you guys this, because I've noticed, and I kind of wanted to get back to you on this, Matt, a little bit. What's the play style of this game? Is this one of those really tactical thinking games, or is it meant to be fast, fun, and just smash them up and go again?
It is not, I would say it is not the most tactical of board games out there, but you do have your one main unit. So that is kind of the focus. And there is definitely a lot of maneuvering going on and how you want to place your drones and any kind of, tagging of buildings you want to do versus combat. There's not intricacies of tiny little moves like into bushes and stuff. There's buildings around. You can take partial cover. You can maybe get into full cover. Maybe you can find two buildings right next to each other and take an alley shot where you shoot somebody through a narrow little slit in between two buildings that are adjacent to each other. But as for each of your turns, you're going to be deploying drones, moving, and then adding your weapons to the firing line. And so what that is weapons based on how fast the weapon can deliver its hot death upon the opponent is how fast that weapon is going to resolve in the round. And you take everyone who's playing, and let's talk about that. This is a 2 to 4 player game. You can play 1-to-1. You can play a 3-person free-for-all. You can play a 4-person free-for-all. You can play teams 2v2.
Nice.
So when everyone's got their weapons lined up in front of them that you take out of your hand, you're going to put those face down. And when you flip them up, you're then going to compare your weapon speeds. And the higher the weapon speed, the faster it resolves.
Nice. So it's pretty much, is it kind of simultaneous turns? Or it sounds like a simultaneous shooting. Is it simultaneous movement as well? Or how does that all work?
Not quite, but it is a regimented style of move. So what we do is we take the biggest, slowest thing on the battlefield is the heavy hitter, the giant guy. They don't react as quickly as the little guys. So all the heavy hitters move first, starting with the Glory Hound. That's player 1, and that's the little tokens called the Glory Hound. So you move first, and then all the other heavy hitters move in clockwise order. Then you go in just in size height. So the combat drones all then move, then repair drones all move, and then recon drones all move. Now, that might sound laborious, but keep in mind, you start out with just your heavy hitter in play, so there's not a ton of movement going on. It's usually just a heavy hitter and maybe one or two drones at the start.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So it sounds, and is it, I love the fact that it's 4-player simultaneous. That's fantastic. There aren't a lot of miniature games that support that. How long is a typical game length? Is this something that's a 2 to 3 hour experience? Is it a quick game? How long does it typically take when you guys get into it, once you know the rules and everything?
It does seem that once people get to know it, we've kind of estimated it's 60 to 90, and that's typically for a 2-player game. It can go a little bit past that for like a 4-player free-for-all, or if a 2v2 has a lot of little, tactical back and forth between the two partners on how they want to do things. Yeah, the games can go longer than that, but we try to keep it short and sweet. We want them to be intense battles, and I think Paul can comment further. They've been doing most of the testing for the past month now.
Yeah, I think definitely the 2-player game tends to play through a lot quicker. We always try to, as Matt was saying, we always try to aim to keep the 2-player game to under an hour if we can. Definitely adding the 3rd and 4th player into it definitely adds time to it. It's interesting. What we've noticed is that there is a bit of it does swing a little bit. I think if people play quite aggressively and really go for it, the games definitely can wrap up quite quickly. But if you have a couple of players that tend to play a lot more defensively and sort of a lot more strategically, I guess, in terms of trying to sit on the outskirts of the board, then that sort of does slow the game down a little bit. So in all fairness, I think the game sort of kind of plays out a little bit based on the style of game that people are playing.
That seems fair. So how are you guys thinking of packaging this thing? Is there going to be the core box with 2 factions in it and then additional? I mean, how are you guys thinking this is going to work out? Have you gotten that far yet?
We kind of have. At this stage, we're looking at everything is going to be going into one box at this stage.
Oh, wow.
So it's going to be quite a big box, I think is fair to say.
Yeah.
That's 4 giant heavy hitters and 12 support units.
Wow.
So
plus everything you need to play, right?
Yeah.
So you get terrain. So you're getting like a bunch of buildings, right? How many buildings are in the box now at this point?
10 buildings, which are, so that includes the sort of rubble base, the actual building itself, which is card, and then another plastic top which you pop on top, and that's where you put your tagging chips.
And the buildings are cool, right? Because they're destructible. So you kind of take them apart and they're blown up, and you put them back together, and they're fully. Is that kind of the way they work?
Definitely, yeah.
Awesome.
So you can fold them flat and put it all back into the box. I must admit, most of us at the moment tend to leave them sort of assembled and just sort of, it's just a bit easier. But they're very easy to pull apart and put together. It's not something you have to labor over, that's for sure.
Nice. So you're going to get a box with 4 of these giant robots, a bunch of buildings. Is the play mat included as well? How are you guys going to handle it? Is it literally everything you need to play?
Everything you need to play. So just at a very quick sort of, I won't go into every component, but there's the battlefield board. There's the 4 factions, which is the heavy hitter, which is the big robot. And then each of those factions has 3 support units. And so you're getting 4 lots of those.
Wow.
And 10 buildings. And then you've got obviously all of the attack dice, defense dice, and then the sponsorship deck, and then the faction cards. So there's a lot of stuff in one box.
Wow, that sounds like quite a beast.
That's amazing.
Have you guys got a price point yet? I know you're getting ready to launch the Kickstarter here. What are you guys thinking for? Have you got too certain to say, or you got it nailed down?
I couldn't have told you a week ago, but I can tell you now. It's $99.
What? That's
wow.
No, seriously, that seems like an insanely good deal. That would normally, I don't even know what to say. That's an incredible. They're pre-painted with logos and everything on them. I mean, wow, that's an amazing deal.
Yeah, we're really pleased actually, because I think for the longest time, certainly a large part of the development time on the game, we really were developing a 2-player game, and so I think, and we had the other 2 factions set aside as expansions. And then, a couple of months back, the company made the call that they actually really wanted to really go hard out. And so we just decided to go, let's put all 4 of them into the box. And so that we just want to get more people engaged, really.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the 4-player game, in my opinion anyway, is so much more fun.
Nice. Well, I'm in. So Matt, let me
sounds crazy.
I want to ask. I know we're running out of time with Matt. So Matt, I like to ask every game designer these two quick questions. One, what is your absolute favorite mechanic that you managed to keep in the game? And then what was the one mechanic that you really, really loved but you had to remove because the game was better without it in the end?
Oh boy. Favorite mechanic would well, it's probably I guess it's just the weapon speeds. It was kind of just a breakthrough on how to make the combat really simultaneous and interesting, where you actually could, make decisions on which weapon systems you want to use at the right time for the right reasons, and who you're targeting to try to, take them down before their weapon goes off, right? So, I think that was a quite interesting thing. As for something that didn't make it in, there was a lot of work done early on concerning that was tailored towards the AR about upgrading defense packs and upgrading weapons and things like that. So there were iterations on upgrading these weapons, and I thought a lot of those were cool. That said, I'm actually not sad that they're out, because I like the game a little simpler as it is now, where you know what the weapon is. You don't have to keep, referring back to, okay, is it Mark III now? Is it Mark IV? I don't get it, So I kind of do like it, even though I do miss some of those designs.
Very cool. And Paul, I wanted to ask you this. So what are some of the components, or what is, not components is the wrong word, but what are some of the elements in either the book or the art or any other source material that comes in the box that you think really capture the essence of the universe?
In all fairness, I think the heroes are definitely the heavy hitters.
Yeah.
They were the first things that we kind of really focused our attention on, and probably the thing that we spent the most time trying to resolve from a design point of view. So from a concept design point of view. So I think for us, that's the real sort of the heroes of our world. But on the flip side, we've actually started having a lot of fun starting to work up the pilots as well, which is something that we've developed more and more as the game has gone along. And so that's been a lot of fun as well.
Great. Fantastic. Craig, do you have any other questions for Matt or Paul?
No, I'm just excited to get my hands on it now.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, total fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakeland and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. Our shout out is to all of our wonderful supporters over at Patreon. Head to patreon.com/the D6 Generation and you too can support the show. So the next big holiday that's coming up, well, St. Patrick's Day is in there, which is important for me because I'm Irish. But the next one where people and companies go a little crazy with making exclusive stuff is Easter, because Easter has all sorts of wonderful religious meanings, but also candy. There's lots of candy. So candy companies come out with cool stuff, and even cookie companies come out with cool stuff. And I recently saw that Targets, at least in the US, the Targets here are carrying an Oreo that is a Peep flavored Oreo. Peeps, if you don't know what Peeps are those little marshmallow bunny things. They're no chicks. I guess they're chicks. Now there's chicks and bunnies, but they started off, I think, as just marshmallow chicks. And think blob of marshmallow rolled in brightly colored sugar crystals. So like bright yellow and bright pink and bright purple. They end up in your basket. Now, I'm not sure how many people really eat Peeps. I guess when you're 5, they're awesome. Somehow my mom still thinks that I love Peeps and she buys them for me every year. So I bite the head off of one and choke it down and think, oh my God, I can't believe I'm eating pure sugar. You can feel your teeth sort of rotting out as you eat one. They do all sorts of different Peeps. Well, Oreo has done a Peep flavored Oreo, and it's got this, it looks like a vanilla Oreo cookie, like the vanilla Oreos, with a bright pink, like neon, hurts your eyes, needs sunglasses filling that I would assume would be the marshmallow peep flavored part of things. And they only sell it at Target. So I'm thinking that I might have to find my way over to Target within the next few days to see if they have them. Because I feel like when companies come out with these limited edition, super weird, must try flavors, I'm a total sucker. Like I absolutely need to try and see if it really is good or disgusting. And I go on quests to find these. Sometimes I have my friends picking them up because I can't find them in whatever store they're supposed to be in. They're out and I'll have someone from another area find it in their Target. I've had people mail me packages of Oreos from other places in the country. So my current Oreo quest is to find these Peep Oreos, which I fear are going to be just as sweet and disgusting as the actual Peeps. But then I saw something that is rumored to be true, and it's one of those not like rumored, just crazy, forget about it rumors, but hey, we've heard from reliable sources, whatever that would be in the candy and sweet junk food world, that the next one is something called a firework Oreo, or not the next one, the one that'll come out around the 4th of July. And it looks like a regular old Oreo cookie, and I think even the chocolate cookie's the same, and it looks like the vanilla part of it is the same. But inside of the vanilla are red and blue Pop Rocks. Now they're calling it popping candy, not Pop Rocks in this little promo thing that I got, but Pop Rocks in your Oreos. I'm not even sure if I want that. I don't know if I want my Oreos to actually be that lively. I think my Oreos, I'm fine with them just being 2 cookies with a cream filling that I can pull apart in numerous ways and sometimes eat the filling first and see if you can get that whole piece of Oreo stuffing in like one piece. You can just eat it and then eat the crunchy Oreos. There's so many ways to eat an Oreo, but I'm not sure I want Pop Rocks in them. Like, what does that do when you have little teeny itty bitty Pop Rocks mixed in with your cream filling goodness? Yet, as weird as this sounds, if this actually ends up being true, much like I'm going on a quest for the Peep Oreos later this week, I will be going on a quest for the fireworks Oreos come 4th of July.
Hey, and now it's time to talk about our friends at Geek Nation Tours. Craig, I am so excited. I can't wait to see Terrace and shake his hand, because not only did he hook us up with our friends at Weta, I mean, it was really thanks to Terrace, he got us in touch with the folks at Weta, which got them on the show. We get to talk to people who actually worked on movies like The Hobbit, Craig. That's pretty freaky.
Lord of the Rings, man. You're hooked on The Hobbit.
He did work on The Hobbit.
I know. Orcrist, man.
But it's awesome.
It just keeps coming back to Orcrist.
But they're working on the great new game, Giant Killer Robots, and what's awesome is if you go to Gen Con with Geek Nation Tours, not only, I mean, Craig and I now are like, we're like the 3rd tier, because you're going to be able to see at the opening dinner. Tier. Not only just seeing Craig and I, which, whatever, because you're going to be so excited to be able to see the folks from Weta Workshop there with Geek Nation Tours. They're going to be there to talk to you about what they do, but also hear all about Giant Killer Robots, the new massive Kickstarter that's going to be fantastic. And this is the kind of stuff that Geek Nation Tours does. They bring you the ultimate geeky experiences that really you can't get. I mean, Craig and I go to Gen Con every year. There's no way without Geek Nation Tours we'd be able to actually shake hands and talk to the guys from Weta. I mean, that is just awesome.
No, it's crazy. And it's not just Weta. I mean, you're going to talk to Mantic. You're going to talk to game designers every night. They've got a different thing. And of course, I'm super excited because this year the big welcome dinner is moving back to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse.
Yum.
So that's
Ruth's
right
Chris.
there is worth the price of admission. And I believe that we're going to have a game session at the steakhouse after dinner, where we're going to be doing various zombie-oriented games, and they've asked me to run a giant werewolf game also.
Fun. That's
so
fun,
I mean, there's this. So if you're like us, there's one reason. But then they're gonna bring these guys from Weta Workshop. You're gonna be sitting at tables with guys who worked on these movies, who are working on this awesome game. You can't oversell the coolness of a Geek Nation Tours Gen Con trip, where you don't have to worry about getting the hotel, which is the biggest headache in all of gamerdom.
Really
you don't have to worry about getting your tickets. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Terrace is going to take care of it all for you, in addition to giving you options to do all this other cool outside stuff. And he's going to bring in all of these celebrities and us to experience and to meet as well. So, I mean, it's really amazing. I'm super excited to talk to these Weta guys.
Oh, me too.
And gals.
Wait. If you want those kind of experiences, there is only one way to get them, and that is to check out Geek Nation Tours, whether it's Gen Con or any of their other super amazing events. Head on over to geeknationtours.com.
Arriba!
The D6 generation. Not as good as Lord of the Rings, but better than The Hobbit.
But the Hobbits has the lovely hobbitses. Smeagol, there is only one Hobbits in the Hobbits. There are 1, 2, many Hobbits in the Lord of the Rings.
Hey, welcome back, and you're going to notice that we're a little New Zealander light in this segment.
Indeed we are.
Yep. That's what happens when you're dealing with giant, enormous, world-encompassing special effects companies as a podcast. They succumbed to some Kickstarter drama and were unable to make the meeting tonight. And of course, we're right against it at the end of the month, so we didn't have a choice. So we told them we'd go forward, and hopefully we'll have them back on the show soon, because I had all kinds of cool questions and everything, and I'm sure you did. And I mean, Orcrist, seriously. But what we decided was our new passion, of course, has been
Blood and Plunder. Pirates, Craig.
Yeah.
Pirates.
Yeah. Or the upstanding British militia, whatever.
The only reason people play these games is for pirates. Everyone else is just an annoying sidekick.
That's right. Or you need an opponent.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm only really concerned because this seems to be shaping up like the diametrically opposed, opposite, negative vision of our early Conflict 47 games. Where I was constantly beating you.
Oh, yes. No, that's true.
This is I do not like the shoe on the other foot, Sam.
We've only played twice, but yes, both
I know,
times,
but still. There was a time when we had only played Conflict 47 twice, and I had won those both.
You can't be too upset that the pirates keep winning. I think the problem isn't you, it's that you're not choosing pirates. I think that's okay. If you were to choose another band of pirates, like let's say the pirates with a different captain, or pirates, anything basically with the word pirates in it, you'd be victorious.
Well, that will certainly be my my go-to next time we play.
So, Craig, what is, for those who are, we've put some pictures on our Twitter feed, we put some pictures on our Facebook page,
and we had Mike on the show.
But for those
who were doing their
maybe missed Mike's presence or maybe forgot, what exactly is Blood and Plunder, the game?
Well, that's the high elevation overview. Okay. It's 28 mil, 25 to 28. I think it's 28. Mm-hmm. They're 28 millimeter, but they have tiny bases, so they'll fit on the ships.
They are a realistic
which is awesome.
Scale. They're not what we would call the heroic scale.
No, they are true scale.
Right.
And so I would say it's 28 millimeter, but it is a very historically based pirate game. This is not like the Pirates of the Caribbean game. This is, in fact, the real pirates, and they're not the real pirates of the golden age of piracy, or what we from the movies and TV shows would think of as the golden age of piracy. These are like the real pirates from back in the day, so to speak.
Right.
And so you're looking at right now, right out of the gate, because of the Kickstarter, you're looking at 3 major factions, but within each faction you have at least 2 sort of sub-factions. So as an example, the British have the British militia, and then you have British buccaneers, which were kind of like their sort of privateer pirate sort of band. Then the Spanish have the Guarda Costa, which is the guys who guard the coast. Mm-hmm. So they're like, they're a pirate hunting group.
Right.
Or they have their Milicianos, which is their militia. So they're like inland, they're onshore coastal defense units. Then you have 4 factions, because then you have the French, and the French are a little limited right now, but they're going to have units coming out any day now, and I expect that I think their booth, which I hope they bring their whole booth to Adepticon, because that booth was awesome at Gen Con.
It was.
I think it's going to be loaded with stuff, with product, because they're already buying and shipping all the stuff from the Kickstarter, including these amazing ships. And they're coming out with new product now. They've got new sort of marketing scheme where they're selling blisters of specific troop units. So let's say you've got like a Guardacosta, or Guardacosta army, you get 2 blisters. Boom! Now you're going to have Milicianos or because there's a lot of crossover in the unit types. So you've got so now right now you have the French. There's 1 French army type right now, and I believe they're coming out with a second French army type. So that'll be I think I'm up to 6 now. And then you have the Brethren of the Coast, which is sort of your catch-all dregs of society. You can find the British in there, you can find the natives in there, you can find the French in there. What you can't find in there is the Spanish, because they're fighting everybody. They're technically they're the guys on top of the heap, so to speak. And so what you're looking at as in Blood and Plunder is a miniatures game that's unit based, and it's an army scale game, and you're playing out these battles. And right out of the book, which is beautiful, by the way, has every mission in it, which I believe there are 5 missions to start. I think every mission has a land only, amphibious, and sea only version to it.
That's the important thing. There are full rules for boats. That is the important part of this game. Because you can't have pirates without boats, Craig. That's a really critical part.
No, well, pirates without boats would be highwaymen.
You'd also have a problem if you didn't have cannon, which you do. Artillery are fully part of the game. You'd have a problem if there weren't muskets and pistols. That's all part of the game. But what I like about it is there's a full boat system.
Flintlocks.
It's pretty
matchlocks.
It's a pretty meaty set of rules for both the ground-based combat, but also the sailing combat. It's actually pretty good on both fronts there, which is pretty impressive. It's like, I would say it's on par with Dystopian Wars, where it can handle both land and sea equally well.
Yeah, indeed. And let's say, so that's the overview, right? Why don't we talk about a couple bits and pieces of the rules that well, first let's start with the models. Why don't we do that? What do you think? I've painted the models. I have an opinion of the models. What do you think of the models?
Well, you've painted pretty much all the British and pirates, right? Or most of them.
I have painted units from everybody but the French right now.
Okay. And I've seen them, and they look fantastic. First of all, they look wonderful. Poses are great. Details great. The sculpts look good, because I didn't see them unpainted. I don't know how much cleanup there was, but based and painted, they look fantastic. And
they come based. You should say that.
That's what I mean. When you've got them all painted up, they do come based, and they stand up nice and flat, which is good. They all look great. The boats are amazing. I mean, really amazing for in general, but also considering the price.
Here's my problem with the boats.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do the rigging.
No,
I don't know why, but I'm balking at doing all that little fiddly string work. That's not what I enjoy doing. And
what about putting a sail
I love the boats right up to the masts, and then I'm like, oh, now what do I do?
What about putting a sail
And that's fine, except every now and then you get somebody like Adam who's like, well, you don't have any sails. What are we going to imagine that? And you're like, oh, come on, I spent so much time on that boat. But he's right, there's no sails. So I don't know.
What if you crumpled up some sail and stuck it like it was, furled?
Well, that's true. And I have actually thought about doing it that way. Yeah, that's it. I have thought about doing it that way.
Well, so the boats look amazing. The figures look amazing. You've painted them wonderfully. You've done some amazing terrain. We'll talk about that in a second. The whole thing looks fantastic on the tabletop. And I will say that in the store, we were playing at our local friendly gaming store here, Midgard Games, one of the newer gaming stores here in the region. We were playing there, and you have this great mat, which I'm sure you'll talk about, all this great sea and land on it, and all these great jungle trees and little huts and everything. And people were really blown away by the ships and the whole scene. It's just an amazing looking, thing to play on. I will say my only concern is it's because they've been so true to history. The models don't really look that different by faction, right? So, or by unit, or more importantly, by unit type. Yeah. So, a guy with a
if you don't know the history, which we do not.
Well, no, but even if you do, you have to really look at them closely. You can't from 2 feet away.
Right. But what I'm saying is a buccaneer gun is totally different from a matchlock rifle. But from, I don't know the difference.
But not only that, but from 2 feet away, you just see they've got a rifle. You can't tell across the table the difference, even if you did know. Right. The subtle differences between the regular rifle and the buccaneer gun, and so I think that's a challenge, and you really have to. My supposition, and then also you have the other challenge of unit markings, because you might have 2 or more units of the same type of thing.
Right.
So you need to. And this can all be solved with painting and some clever thinking. So it's not a big deal, but that's the only. As you're building your forces, you want to think about how you can distinguish units and unit types, because that's for me is the only negative, and it's not really even a negative. It's just a thing. It's just a challenge, right?
Right. Well, I would. Okay, so from my point of view, I have painted 75 of these now.
Mm-hmm. That's a lot of dudes.
Yeah, that's a lot of dudes. I have painted 2 faction starters of the British, one of each of their 2 types, and then 1 faction starter of the Milicianos, the Spanish Milicianos. And I will say that, first of all, they're metal, and there are 4 separate models per troop type. So there are 4 Sea Dogs, there are 4 militia, there are 4 what are they called, the freebooters, there are 4 forlorn hope. Like every type of troop you can have, there's 4 poses which have totally different gear, they have totally different clothing, totally different poses, totally different faces, totally different hair, but you've only got those 4 poses. So when you're like talking about doing like 2 or 3 sets of those, and in the core troop type of each force, you're going to have like 12 guys of the same. Right. So you're going to have 3 repeat poses. So you're trying to, as a painter, you're trying to shake things up. You don't want to paint them the same because you don't want them to all look identical, as their poses are going to be identical. Right. So you're trying to shake it up with any way you can with the paint. And the problem there is, as Russ says, you're like, if anybody who's watched Black Sails, you guys know they all look the same pretty much on both sides, because the British guys, the militia, have red coats, and that's very true in Blood and Plunder also. But when you're talking about the pirates, you're especially if you're me, your artistic like desire to get everybody to look different gets the better of you, and so this guy's gonna have a black vest, and this guy's gonna have a blue vest, and this guy's gonna have a red vest, and but then what you get is this big giant mishmash that looks great in a diorama maybe, but on the table, as Russ says, the practical gameplay of telling one unit that's identical to the next unit and has the same 4 poses in it can be very trying. So we've actually been going back and forth a lot. Mike at Flintlock Games has been awesome right from the get-go. All the guys at Flintlock Games have been great, but Mike has been so responsive as we've been learning the game, and I forgot my ship cards one day, and he just sent me all the files for the ship cards so I wouldn't have to go home. I mean, they have been phenomenal, fantastic. And we did talk to him about this issue, and his response was, yep, it's a historical game, but they hear that a lot. And I think they're looking at the French models. I think they're working on that, because there's one particular French unit that all have the same kind of goofy looking Robin Hood hat.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like they're all different poses and everything, but they've all got the same kind of, and a little bit, if like you haven't seen it, Russ, because we haven't really played with any Spanish troops, but there are Spanish troops that have, like, there's one group that has like the big Three Musketeers hat with the big feathers. Not as big as the commanders, of course. The commanders have their own big giant feather thing. But so I think there's a little bit with that. And he said the hats might work a little bit, but what he said, and what I think I'm going to have to go back and do, he said, you've got to do something with the base rim,
right?
Like maybe the back quarter, and facing doesn't matter. So you don't have to do facing lines or anything on the bases. And we should say the base is very, very small compared to what you're normally used to. Like a normal 28 millimeter base will actually expand the guy out to maybe, like, his base is about half his total height.
Right.
And these guys, their base is basically like their shadow at high noon.
Right.
And it's right underneath them. It's a little circle. It's awesome. It's a circle of incredibly detailed planking. So they look like they're on a ship with a little raised lip around the edge. And I've painted the little raised lip black so it matches all the metalwork on all the cast iron on all my stuff. But what I think I'm going to have to go back and make like maybe the back 45 degree arc on each model, and kind of do that over in different colors. Maybe like I will do sets of 4, like, because as they come, and do like all the blue ones are Sea Dogs maybe, and then there's one set of 4 will have 1 line, one set of 4 will have 2 lines, and that kind of I want to keep it subtle. I don't want it to be glaring, but at the same time, like we had a huge issue. I mean, it didn't end up. Matt, I mean, we managed to track who was who, but we had a big giant scrum in the last game we played in the middle of the board, and guys were dying, and so the units were getting all strung out, and it was kind of hard to tell because they were all interpenetrating. So I think I do have to go back and do that. My only other thought was trying to pick some article of clothing. Like my red coats all look great because they're all wearing red coats, but different color pants and different color undershirts and different color hats and all things like that. But I think that will look too uniform for what I'm trying to go for with the pirate look. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think the base thing is the way to go. And as far as the cleanup went, it's I mean, there's some flashing. There's some of the remnants that you have to that you have to cut off. But it's been really good, my experience, and 75 models. So I'm pretty deep in at this point. As far as experience with the models goes. My only problem, and it has nothing to do with Flintlock Games or Blood and Plunder, is priming metal at this time of year in New England is very challenging.
Right.
So my primer is running off the models, and I'm going to have to multiple do it. But so far, it's all worked out good.
Yeah. Need to airbrush, my friend. Airbrush.
Yeah, I can't do it. It's so the startup and the set the setup and the teardown is so to me
you do such
daunting and time consuming.
You do such huge numbers of models. I think it'd be worth it for you.
Yeah, I don't know.
But in any case, the models look great. The boats are amazing. You do have to sort of be into sails and rigging to get the full effect. But even with the sails off there, I still think they look awesome. Also, they come with cannon and little anchors and all kinds of little bits and bobs. So don't forget that either. So great looking on the table. But the next question you got to ask is, that's all great, but how does it play? So we've played now 2 games, right, Craig? So we've not played enough to do a full review, but we've been getting such good reaction on our Twitter feed and our Facebook page about what do you think, what do you like? So we thought we'd do a little
and if you want to see pictures, check it out, because Russ and I have both been tweeting pictures the whole time we've been playing.
Oh, it looks awesome. So we played 1 full land game. So the first week, Craig brought all the dudes painted, but no boats, which I teased him mercilessly for. But we had no boats, just guys, which was good because we had to learn the basic rules of the game. And fundamentally, it's a unit-based, skirmish. I'm calling it skirmish, but you definitely can have many units. We played, I think, with 4 to 5 units aside, Craig, the first
we played 4 units plus a commander aside.
Yeah. So small number of units, but each unit on my side was between 4 and 5 models. So not 16 to 20 dudes basically running around on the table.
Mm-hmm.
So it still feels like a skirmish game, but a good number of guys. But you could easily scale it out. And I don't think adding more units would materially slow the game down a lot. It is an integrated turn system, so I'm going to move and fully activate a unit, and then Craig is going to fully activate a unit. We're going to go back and forth until all the units on our sides have activated, and then new turn.
Right. But there's one of the main innovative mechanics.
Yes, there are several in this game.
There are.
Yeah.
But speaking of the everything okay?
Yes, we're fine on this side.
My echo started. Okay. Anyway, it's echoing in my ear.
Interesting.
It's not echoing to you?
No, not at all. Fascinating.
It is fascinating.
It must be
really upset. I'm like going deaf.
I guess so.
I'm going to ignore it. Okay. It's very hard to ignore. Yes. Well, so right out of the box, right out of the gate in the game, the first innovative mechanic that you're going to run into is the initiative.
Yes. So, there's 2 things happening. So, the first thing that's just interesting about the game is it does, in fact, use a deck of cards, right, for both players. And each player is going to have their own deck. You can use a standard deck of playing cards, but you're much better off using their official decks.
Yeah.
Kind of like Malifaux, because some of the rules are written right on their decks, and so you definitely want that. And so
and a couple cheats.
Yes, a couple of handy tidbits. So each player is going to draw a number of cards into their hand equal to the number of units they have to activate in the turn, right?
Yeah.
And then Craig and I each going to secretly lock in a playing card face down. We're going to flip them over. And the player goes first is the player who has played the card that is the highest suit and then the highest number in the suit. And the suit priority is just like it is in poker. So spades are high, clubs are low. But also, as Craig mentioned, there are some handy icons on the cards to remind you of which suit's the highest.
Yeah, because I don't know that. I know nothing about that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even notice. Actually, I knew it and then forgot it and didn't notice in our first game where I was like desperately clawing through my reference material looking for my little cheat sheet on, the card, the suit preference, that the actual official cards from Flintlock Games in the bottom right-hand corner actually shows you. It's like inside the suit symbol is 1, 2, 3, or 4 dots showing you the suit precedence of that card.
Right, mo dots being better. So
mo dots, mo death.
So on the official cards, you have not only the icons to tell you which suit is more higher initiative, but secondly, there's numbers in the corner and not having to deal with face cards to remind you which of those cards, if you both play a club, for example, who gets to go first. But then, inside the card, there is a list of the 3 different unit types. I think they're untrained, trained, and veteran or something like that. Or inexperienced, trained, and veteran or something like that.
Yeah.
And you get a number of activations depending on A, how trained the unit is, and B, the type of card you play. And what's interesting is the lower initiative card you play, like the worst card from your hand, so clubs, for example, being the lowest suit, gets you the most activations per unit.
Most actions.
And most actions,
unit.
right.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen here is I might want to have one unit do a lot, but to pull that off, I'm going to have to play a card that's probably going to go second this activation. Yep. Mm-hmm. But if I really, really, really want to go first, I'm going to have to, A, have to be lucky enough to have a high value card in my hand, but then B, I'm all the spades, for example, have low activation numbers, so I'm going to not get as many actions if I play later. So it's a really, right there already is 2 interesting things. I have control over my initiative, and then the other thing that's in the back of your head is this hand of cards you have is going to stay with you and not change throughout the entire turn. So you have a number of cards equal to the number of units you have on the table, and you're going to activate all your units before you draw a new set of cards again. So one of those units is going to get the best card in your hand, and another one's unit is going to have to get the worst card in your hand. And you have to kind of decide, which unit's going to get which card, even in the beginning, because if I'm going to have a card with a low number of actions, which unit can afford to take less actions, which unit needs to have more actions, which unit needs really to go first, which unit can go second. So lots going on there. And then not only that, but of course the normal strategic decisions around, do I need to activate before Craig does? And if I do, which unit's going to do that? So it's you're really thinking about it when you look at those cards.
Yeah, there's a lot of battlefield presence built into this one mechanic. So like you say, you can get quick off the draw, but you're only going to get 1 or 2 things in, or you can wait and take what's coming and then do a little bit more. At the same time, you're trying to figure out what the other guy is doing. So there's a lot built into these initiative cards that I think really carry the game forward and make it dynamic right from the very beginning.
And there's also a nice little mechanic too, and another part to the game is there's these cool little metal coins, and each side gets. Is it always 3, Craig, or is it based on point value?
No, it's always 3, except your commander can some commanders are more or less lucky.
Cool.
And sometimes you can get 4, and sometimes you can get 2.
So you'll typically have 3 of these coins, and these coins are one-use coins, and one of their primary uses is for rerolls in battle and combat. More about that in a little bit. But another use for them is you can mulligan your hand. So if you draw a hand of cards and you're like, this hand is terrible, I really need to go first, and I didn't get any spades, you can spend one of your very valuable coins, which also rerolls, as all gamers know, are very valuable. So you're throwing away a reroll, but you're getting a chance to reset your hand. So I like that there's these options to mitigate luck. But you're limited on them. You only have 3 of them, so you want to use them very wisely. So again,
and the third thing that those coins can do for you is if your commander is an untenable, the commander has to be attached to a unit at all times. Mm-hmm. And if he's in an untenable situation, he's about to die, you spend that coin, and as long as there's another unit within 8 inches, he basically immediately teleports to that next unit and and cheats fate, escapes death, and he is now part of that next unit.
So there's a lot going on there too.
I mean, it's a huge get out of jail free card on top of everything else.
So there are tough choices with those coins, but I really like. This is one of my favorite mechanics. Is it brings that integrated turn system, and it brings that you don't always know who's going to go first or second. It's not even alternating, right? Because I activate my first unit, I get initiative on that unit, then Craig goes, he activates, but now we each play a card again. So now in our second activation, he might go first or I might go first. We don't know. So it's kind of like the dice bag mechanic in Antares or Bolt Action, except you have control over of influencing the odds.
A little control.
A lot of control, because if I play my 13 spade, I'm reasonably sure I'm going to go first, but I mailed the rest of my cards, maybe clubs, and I'm going to be going second on all my other units, right?
Yeah.
So
control within dependent upon the cards that you get. Exactly. But if you're using your cards wisely, you can put like in Bolt Action, sometimes you can maybe get like 2, or if you're really lucky, like the guys at Captain Con, 3 activations back to back to back. But in this game, like Russ is saying, if you've got the cards, you can kind of plan it. Well, so you can have 2 units go back to back if you plan it right and the luck is with you.
And the other thing too is if you do get and I'm using air quotes here, bad hand of, let's say, all clubs, you're almost certainly destined to go second every time. But it also means all of your units are going to get a full more actions than your opponent's doing if he's playing all spades. So it's not always bad to have one of those low initiative cards, because they do offer that, well, you got a crappy hand in terms of being able to go first, but you got a good hand in terms of your units can do more than your opponents can this turn, right? Yeah. So it's they've got a sort of built-in mechanic to help you out. And conversely, if you really out-initiative your opponent, you're also going to get less action. So it's kind of a neat, really a lot of well-thought-through things here. And those number of actions is really important, because what your units can do, it's not automatic. When you activate a unit, you get to move and shoot. Instead, you have a list of actions you can choose from.
Yeah.
And that number of actions, if you've got 2 actions, for example, you could move, which is essentially run in most miniature games. Mm-hmm. You could move and shoot. You could shoot, then move. You could rally, then move. There's a bunch of things you can do. And there's also dedicated actions, which take your entire activation, but each additional bonus action increases your odds of it succeeding, right? So a lot going on there. And having like 3 actions means you could shoot, reload, and shoot again. So you could.
You couldn't do that.
Well, you could if you had fast reload.
That's true. Okay. One particular type of troop could do that.
Or if you half shot. But there's some really cool things you can do.
Oh, that's true too.
Right? So there's some really neat options for you that get interesting when you have those extra actions. So 3 actions is a very powerful place to be with that as well. So I really like this mechanic a lot. It feels very fresh also. I've not seen another game that is quite like this before.
Yep. And now, talking about those actions, move gets you 4 inches, and it's very what I like about it is it seems to take so many things that other games bog down with, like difficult terrain and cover, things like that. They get wrapped up in this game in a more interesting, to me, in a more straight through line kind of approach, and they cease to be sort of points of argument, and they just become cool things that are happening on the board. Like a move action gets you 4 inches. If you're going over any kind of terrain, it gets you 3 inches, unless it's impassable, in which case you can't go there. If you go over 8 inches, so you take more than 2 move actions in any turn, fatigue, which we'll talk about in a bit, you get tired because you've moved. So you can sprint 12, or if you've got a couple different keywords on your card, even further, but you're going to get exhausted by sprinting. Meanwhile, you can kind of reposition and move around a little bit. Shooting, I love, because as you know, until Russ gets a hold of some pistols, shooting's not supposed to be that powerful in this time period, except that when you get pistol guys right on top of you, and then it's pretty deadly. Although I tend to think your guys probably would have wiped me out even faster, Russ, if they had, instead of standing, shooting, and falling back, if they had charged me and had that reroll in their combat with their loaded pistols.
Maybe, yes, but the thing is, shooting is powerful at short range. It's very inaccurate at long range.
Exactly.
Which is very historically accurate.
Yeah. I mean, they've got range bands, 4-inch range bands going on. Also, there's a lot of 4 inches a segment of measuring going on. 4-inch range bands, and it gets harder to hit for every full 4 inches that it's going out there. And their scores, their shooting scores aren't that high to begin with. So shooting is less effective, generally speaking, than trying to get in on the other guy. In addition to that, every time you shoot under normal circumstances, small arms get 2 reload counters, and it takes 2 actions usually, unless you've got a unit that's really good at, they've got fast reload. it's going to take 2 actions before you can shoot again. So it's not like you can just make a gun line and your Warhammer Fantasy Empire army is just not going to move. They're just going to shoot the crap out of whoever's coming at you. You're going to shoot once or twice and then they're going to be on top of you if that's what's going to happen, which is, if you watched the latest episode of Black Sails, exactly what would happen. Because there's a militia versus pirate battle in that game, in that episode.
Nice.
Yeah, so you've got the shooting, you've got the hand-to-hand. I think what Russ said about the dedicated actions is great because you can do more complicated stuff, but it's going to take your whole activation. But every unused action from your card gives you a +1 on the difficulty level of what you're trying to do, whether you're trying to change your sail setting or you're trying to do something else that's going to be a long-term thing. Combat, actually, once you're locked in, charging is not a dedicated action, interestingly enough. However, fighting once you're locked in combat is a dedicated action. So except for rare circumstances, you can't charge in, get your fight off, and then fight again with that same unit. And if you do, more fatigue. So it just keeps these really cool mechanics keep interleavening. I don't know. They keep going in with each other and intermingling and making really cool synergies with the game itself, I think.
So we should talk about fatigue, because it's another really interesting mechanic. I think.
Yes, indeed.
Craig and I have spoken many times in the show that we really like games that have morale mechanics, and specifically games that also have suppression mechanics. And anytime you can bring those things together, it's great. That's one of the reasons we like Bolt Action and
Battlefield Friction.
Yes. And they did a really good job with this game. So they have this little red die, and it's obviously 6-sided, and it's got numbers on it that indicate the amount of fatigue a unit is experiencing. And a unit picks up fatigue whenever a unit is shot at,
and hit,
and you have to make a test or tests plural to see if you take any fatigue from the shooting, and you have to take more tests if you lost some guys in the volley of fire as well. And every die that fails to get a success on your morale test indicates you pick up 1 fatigue point. And so if you have no fatigue, you then put a little red die next to you and turn it to the side, indicating the number of fatigue you have. Now, the first fatigue point you get doesn't do anything to you, but it's there, and it's already counting against you when you earn more fatigue. And every point you get past 1 fatigue point starts to affect your unit in some way. You get 1 less action, which really sucks, and can go from there to get worse, to being you can't do anything except for rally, to finally, if you have more fatigue points on your unit than you have models, your unit is basically broken and is removed from the table.
Or double, I think.
Or it's not double, it's just more.
Is it just more?
Yeah, because a couple times you had 2 guys and you kept getting 2 fatigue. I was like, come on, 1 more point. But what's interesting about it is the only way to get rid of fatigue points, it's not like some games where fatigue points go away a little bit each turn or anything like that. The absolute only way you can get rid of a fatigue point is to take a rally action. Now, a rally action is not dedicated. You can take it along with something else. So, for example, if you got one of those really coveted 3-action, initiative cards, and you've already got a rally point on you from last turn, you can say, like, well, I'm going to rally to get that to 0, then I'm going to move, and then I'm still going to shoot. So that third action really becomes important. You could still activate without removing your rally point if you wanted to, if it was only 1, for example. But now the problem is, if you take any fire at all, it's a good chance you're going to get a 2, which means now you're down 1 action. So if I issue myself an order with only 1 action, I have 0 actions, and so that's really tough. But then there's other ways also that fatigue becomes a problem. So in addition to getting shot at, you also have to make fatigue tests from casualties in hand-to-hand combat. But you also have to make fatigue. You also automatically get fatigue if at any time you move over 8 inches in a single activation. So remember, we mentioned that you could move multiple times. And if you have a third action, for example, because you took the 3-action rule, you can move 12 inches, but you're going to take a fatigue point. Or if you choose to do other things, the other thing Craig just mentioned, I'm forgetting it now, also causes fatigue. So
running,
yes,
fighting,
yep. So
pretty much pushing anything past
pushing
once
yourself
per turn.
past once per turn causes extra fatigue. So all of a sudden, you really got to decide: do I want to voluntarily take more fatigue? Am I safe next turn? Also, when you're in hand-to-hand combat, any fatigue you've got carrying over is going to affect the ability to win the combat. So there's definitely got that mechanic of if you can shoot the unit first and suppress them a little bit, then charge them, you got better odds in hand-to-hand combat than if you don't. So a lot going on in this game, but the fatigue mechanic, Craig, I really love that as much as the initiative card mechanic. I think those two things together make the game feel really good.
Oh, it's great. And I mean, that is very much the pinning of Blood and Plunder. The pinning from both Gates of Antares and Conflict 47 bolt action. That's what this is. So it's being used to track multiple things, which I love. When a design is so elegant, it can handle multiple thematic elements of the battle with one mechanic. And so you're talking exhaustion, you're talking morale, and it's all rolled into this one thing. And it's rolled into, now you could try it, and you can try to do this in a game and fail. But these guys have done it. I mean, it's just great. I love you can feel the units getting tired and scared at the same time. Like your better units can rally faster, and I echo your point. I really enjoy this mechanic and what it does to the overall game. Like I said, it interconnects with the the skill, the experience level of the troops. It interconnects with their each one has a I can't remember the resolve score,
right?
Which is what they're trying to roll each turn to avoid getting fatigue or to get rid of the fatigue when they rally. And it all ties in with the activation cards. I mean, it's great. It's a really, really nice, clean design.
And I think the other part of the game that they add that I like a lot, I mean, the shooting's good. The hand-to-hand combat's good. It's pretty straightforward. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But the other mechanic I think that really brings the game together for me is how commanders work. Commanders, as Craig mentioned earlier, they attach to units, and they essentially assume the stats of the unit, but then they enhance the unit. But the big deal is that commanders can issue orders, and it's generally 2, but there are commanders that have more and less, 2 orders to either themselves or other units within their command range, which is often 12 inches, right? So, and these stats are all on the commander's card.
It's actually, it goes anywhere from like 8 inches to 20 inches.
So it can be very large. And this gives you that sort of feeling that I like about War Machine, which is your main dude really where they are is important. They feel like they're actually a leader. But what's really cool about this, is that the order the commander gives can essentially be any action, bonus action out of activation to any other unit near them. And so what I was able to do against Craig, which is pretty interesting, was he mentioned those pistols earlier. I would activate one of my pistol units, and so I'd get 2 activations, so they would run forward to get within 4 of Craig. And then as their second action, they'd shoot Craig. Yes. And now they're stuck there hanging out in the wind. But if Craig didn't activate that unit next, and I got to go again for whatever reason, like let's say we activate again, and now I play an Ace of Spades card, I can activate my commander. He can give an order to the unit that just moved to move again, and they run back behind cover. Yep. And so now they've run in, shot, and gotten back before my opponent can really respond properly. So it makes them feel really good. But also it's great because the commander can give orders like he can go ahead and give an extra rally order to a unit to clear some of that rally, those fatigue points off. Or he might give an extra reload order to a unit. The rules here, though, are that a single unit can't get more than 1 order per activation. So the commander, he can give his own unit 1 order or one other unit or 2 different units orders, but 1 unit can't get 2 orders. But that extra feeling of the commander being near there and that bonus, it really gets you wanting to keep your units within that command range of your leader because he becomes a very powerful piece.
It's huge because those can also be dedicated orders. Mm-hmm. So where that would normally soak up an entire activation of a unit, like I was doing that the other day with the with my land-based cannons. I could you have to for a unit to be working a cannon, they have to be assigned to that, which is a dedicated action. They don't do anything else. They just kind of hunker down and get ready to fire the cannon. But I could have my commander, they could move up, they could shoot, then my commander gives them an order later on, boom, now they're connected to that cannon without me having to blow an entire activation. Or my command, they're standing there unconnected yet. My commander activates himself, his unit, dedicates them to that cannon, and then in the next activation they fire that cannon. So it gives you a lot more flexibility. It's a lot more forgiveness for what's happening on the battlefield, which I think is great. It makes them feel like they're commanders. They're like shouting things in the battle, and they're having an impact. They're not just there to lend a leadership, or whatever. They don't lend leadership.
Their abilities are cool, and some of them are pretty neat, and they all have sort of an active ability that's important. Like the guy I was playing, if his unit ever fully eliminated an enemy unit, all of my units within his command range would lose a fatigue because they're basically like inspired by his awesomeness. I think, Craig, yours let him re-roll fatigue tests or rally tests or something. So
rally tests.
They're very powerful abilities, but it's really all about those command points, and you're going to be really thinking about where your leader is and how he impacts command. And I think you combined that with the fatigue mechanic, with the initiative mechanic, and the one other mechanic that I think is really pretty brilliant is the reload system. So when you think about the era this game takes place, it's taking place in the era of flintlocks, right? And so flintlocks are slow-firing weapons. When you think about every movie you've ever seen or just historically about flintlocks, it's you spend as much, more time reloading them than you do shooting them. So reloading should be a key part of this game. And what's really interesting about this is whenever a unit shoots, if your entire unit fires, there's also these special little black dice that are dedicated just to reloading, and they have little icons on them to remind you. And they have a series of numbers between 1 through 4. And most units, when they fire their guns, if they all fire their guns at once, you set this little black reload die next to them and put it on the 2, meaning that it's going to take 2 full reload actions to get their guns fully reloaded. So if you do that, and again, if you get 3 actions and you fired last turn, you got a 2 reload die on your unit. If I got 3 actions, I could spend 2 of them reloading, so I get my reloads back to clean, and then I can spend a action firing. But the other thing that's kind of cool I can do is if I choose to only have half the unit fire, I can say, okay, only half the guys are going to fire their guns, so I roll less dice. I'm only rolling one die for every model that fires. But now I just put a single 1 reload die next to the unit, which makes them easier to load faster. And now you get the feeling, it very easily simulates the idea that the guns are firing in ranks. First 2 guys fire, okay, they reload while the second 2 guys fire. Okay, the first, so you're throwing less dice per shot, but you're firing more regularly. Or if your commander's nearby, getting that extra reload order in there can help you get them reloaded faster, right? So that's a really cool mechanic also. And then certain things like cannon can have reload dice up to 4 to take longer to reload. Just a really, again, trivially simple mechanic that has such a very big impact on the game, but also has a big impact on the feeling of the game. It really feels like you're firing flintlocks and not, machine guns.
Right. And we should say, just because it happened just the other night, because you're using these cards, there are jokers in the deck, and the jokers are events, and the events can impact the game. We got one of the mildest events you can get, a light rain, and all it did was add 1 reload marker every time you shot anything.
Right. And
all of a sudden, you're looking at like 2, maybe 3 turns or activations between being able to shoot. It was that one little thing completely changed the game, and because it happened in the middle of the game, it was like, wow, like the whole thing changed because the rain started. I don't think I've felt that kind of an impact with that sort of a simple, clean mechanic weather-wise in a very, very, very long time.
Nothing more frustrating to a pirate, Craig, than wet powder.
That's right. Keep your powder dry.
Keep your powder dry. But it's exactly right, Craig. It really, and especially, it was great that it came in so late in the second game. We had already played a game before. So you and I had both figured out the cadence of how our guys are going to shoot, right? And the timing all down. And that requiring one extra little action, all of a sudden the commanders are that much more important. And only 2 units are really going to be firing every turn. And do I want to go half rates of fire?
And you're looking at your gun line and you're going, okay, I've only got 1 shot now before I have to enter in hand to hand, because I'm not going to have the time, no matter what kind of shenanigans I pull. They're going to get 3 reload markers there, so I'm not going to shoot a long distance shot, and then hope for the best later on. I have to hold it's whites of their eyes, Russ.
Yeah,
whites
exactly.
of their eyes.
So, and that's a couple of things about the game we should talk about. One is that how the actual combat works is pretty simple. So it's a D10-based system, and it's a success-based system. So basically, when you're shooting or attacking in hand-to-hand combat, you're rolling a number of dice equal to the number of guys shooting or attacking.
And you want to roll high.
Yeah, you want to roll high, and there's target numbers on your card. Melee target number, a shooting target number, and every die that's equal to or exceeds that number, however, there are modifiers based on range, typical things, little charts you look at. And the number of successes you get, then your opponent gets saves. Now, this is interesting. Your save is always really bad, like 9+ on a D10, unless you've got any kind of cover, right?
Yeah.
And then if you have any kind of cover, your save becomes whatever your save against shooting is. So it's almost like skilled models in cover can use cover more effectively, but skilled or unskilled, if you're in the open, you're kind of screwed. Which is pretty cool.
And that's what I mean. Like the argument has now been taken out because the cover is in a totally different part of the game.
It's not in the hit rolls.
Exactly. It's what it is if you have any cover at all, you're going to get that save. So if there's anything between you, the only real argument is going to be, is it going to stop a bullet if the bullet hits, or is the bullet going to go right on through? Because if the bullet's going to go right on through, you still get your cover. Now you get your cover save. It might be a 7. It might be a 6. Without that cover, you're going to get a 9. So that's always going to suck. If it's hardcover, it's like a stone wall or something that would stop a bullet. You're just going to get an additional bonus to that stat. Which is the only thing that I don't like is the way the system is conveyed. Right. The rules are all awesome. I would rather they talk about +1 on your die roll as opposed to -1 on your stat. Yeah. Because then you have to, and you see this in the rule book over and over again. -1, that's a good thing. They have to constantly remind you that it's good. A -1 is good because they're minusing to your stat as opposed to just kind of like you're used to plus being a good thing, so +1 to your die roll would have. But that's nitpicky.
So that's the core mechanics. But what I think is awesome is how they then layered in the ships, right? So so all they had to do. The game is still unit activation, right? So ships don't count as units. It's actually the crew on the ship, your units themselves, and they have great simple rules for structures and basically abstract for how many guys fit in a space. And that also applies to ships. So basically each deck of the ship is essentially a little mini structure, and they tell you how many guys, depending on the size of the ship, and there's different classes of ships and everything else. And that's where the guys go. And then your crew, when you go to activate the unit that's on the ship, you can decide what kind of action they're going to take. And there's additional actions beyond the ones we talked about before, moving and shooting and rallying. There's additional ones you can take while on the ship. You can change the trim of the sails. You can crew a specific gun. You can fire the guns you're crewing. And, of course, there's rules for swivel guns. There's rules for cannon. There's small, heavy, and, really big cannons. And it's really very simple and straightforward. I like the ship movement rules, too. So, basically, ships have to take their current speed and movement 3 times during an activation, once at the very beginning of your turn, once at the very end of your turn when your last unit activates, and then at some point in the middle of your activations of all your units, you got to pick the ship to move one more time. Yeah. And basically this keeps the ship moving at its little speed, and depending on how many sails you've got to set up and the direction of the wind relative to the ship, which is all very cleanly handled on some quick reference cards, you can immediately know how many inches your ship moves. And that's pretty much it. There's a little turning template you use to turn your ship when you want to try to steer the darn thing. And there's a couple extra rules about, if you're heading right into the wind, that's not good and things like that. But otherwise, it's really pretty straightforward, and it just works, right? I mean, it was pretty clean. I liked it a lot.
No, I think it's great. And it's, it gets more complicated because then you can deal with the wind, where the wind is, you're going to deal with where the wind is coming from. You're going to deal with rigging. You can aim at the rigging. You can aim at the hull when you're shooting. If you aim at the rigging, it's going to slow them down. Then the weather can change. Like we had a weather change, and we had 2 things with the weather change in the middle of the game that started the rain also came with a wind change. But when I rolled on the wind change chart, it let my opponent choose, and my opponent was the only guy with a boat with sails. So he went, I'm running fast. I'm running large with the wind. I think we'll leave the wind where it is.
Right.
And so the wind didn't change, but the rain came in. And so all of that is tied in. And you can box, if you get into trouble, you can do an advanced maneuver, which is box hauling, tacking, and wearing, which are all explained very neatly in the book. And that's an advanced maneuver. You have to have guys that are actually, that's where you need sailors on your ship to do it. Everything else is going to be pretty standard, and the ship can kind of almost do it on its own. As long as you have a guy on the quarterdeck where the tiller is, you're not going to have any sort of negatives for that. But if you want to increase or decrease your sail setting, meaning how much sail you have out on your rigging, that's going to take a test. And if you want to do an advanced maneuver, one of these advanced maneuvers, which all have to do with where the wind is coming from, and you trying to maneuver around, the wind being like right in your face, basically, you're going to take these tests. And if you take the test and you fail, nothing bad happens, that unit is has basically wasted its activation, and the ship keeps going the way it was going. And there's a couple cool things where if you end up right into the teeth of the wind, you're just going to stop moving and then start getting pushed backwards, which is kind of neat. So there's all kinds of cool stuff, but it's more nods as opposed to you're not doing a lot of algebra figuring out what's going on with the wind.
Right.
There's a cool gauge. It's going to take care of that, a lot of that for you. And then there's those 3 options if you're not just running large, going straight ahead. So I think they've really nailed the sailing, because you've got the basic mechanics down, but at the same time, it's not bogging down the game. This game that is a nice, fast-paced game.
Right, exactly right. So that's pretty much the whole thing. I don't think we missed much. We can't review it yet, but I think you can tell from Craig and I that we're really excited. My only concerns about the long-term viability of the game is just, will the factions feel really different? But I have high hopes, because what gets me excited is the captains have such a strong influence, I think, on how your army plays. Right. I don't know if they're quite as strong as the different Warcasters and War Machine, but I could see that being a big...
Well, you know who is, Russ?
Who's that?
Is you actually have historical commanders.
Oh, yes, and they would be like that.
Yeah, and right. So you have Henry Morgan, and you have Francois Delaunay, I don't know French, Manuel Rivera de Pardal. Right. Actually, when you buy a starter set for your faction, it comes with a little deck of cards. Each unit has 1 card in there, and it comes with a bunch of commanders, including historical commanders, which are also in the rule book. So you don't need those cards to see what the other guy's going to have available to him. Those point costs go up a lot, but they add, not just do they have more range to their commands and more commands to give, they also have other cool. There's a Commodore special ability that allows guys to be better directing multiple ships. There's all kinds of cool stuff that gets rolled into those higher level commanders. So far, we've only been playing the mid-level generic commanders too. So I think there's a lot, and you're going to be fighting a totally different game against, for instance, the Spanish militia than you would against the British militia, because the Spanish militia they have natives with bows and arrows. They have lanceros, which are basically landless men and escaped slaves and whatnot using spears. So you'd have a totally different kind of setup, and you'd have to deal with things completely differently than when you're dealing with the British militia, which is kind of like mezza shooting with a couple of really cool hard hitting units that kind of back them up.
Right.
So I do think there's a lot of variation in there.
Yeah, very cool. So we'll keep you appraised. Keep listening to achievements for our latest updates in this thing. And we get a little farther down the play cycle, I think. But Craig, I am so looking forward to Adepticon. We're going to be meeting up with our friends from Flintlock Games.
All the guys at Firelock Games are going to be working with us. We're going to actually do one of our. It's the first time we've been able to bring one of our D6G. We call it a what do we call it? We call it a mega battle.
Do we call it anything? Okay.
Okay. Well, sometimes I call it a mega battle in my head.
Mega battle.
There's an echo there. I don't know, but it basically means as many people as want come. We have everything you need. Only this time it's being provided by the Firelock Games guys. That means they're awesome ships, they're awesome models, they're awesome terrain, and we've got a scenario that we're working out, and we're just going to be just having a blast. I think it's Saturday night at Adepticon, and it's just going to be a really great time. Mike and the crew there are, like I said, they're super excited. They're already talking about the scenario. They're really historical guys, and we're really TV movie guys. So it's very interesting. But they're like, yeah, we'll go with that. They're super excited just to like whatever we're gonna throw together. So that is gonna be awesome, Russ. I'm super psyched about that.
So hopefully we'll see you then. And if not, listen for us more details on this in future episodes.
Indeed.
Did you ever notice? Say it along with me now. Is brought to you by all of our fine friends who suffered through the video at Patreon and now help us keep the lights on day in and day out, making this show possible. Each one of them carrying approximately 100 other listeners on their backs. So thank them, and I thank you as well. But today in particular, I like to thank Keith Parks, Keith Shutters, Kelly Cottle, Ken Crouch, and Ken Squires. Thank you, Keiths, Kens, and Kelly, and everybody who has gone that extra mile to help the show. If you'd like to, go over on Patreon, check it out. We'd really, really appreciate it. Did you ever notice how quickly your bank account can drain? I'm really good at saving, and I can save, and I just like to see those little numbers kick up and up and up. But then they reach a critical mass, and it's like woof, and they just disappear and evaporate. And I just went through one of those experiences, and it ties in with what I talked about last week. So I thought I would like to share that with you, and I'm not sure why, but here goes. And I talked a lot about this last time. I don't want to belabor the point, but, Night Models canceled the Marvel Superheroes game, and I went through this existential crisis that you all shared with me. And thank you, everyone who's been sending me possible options and replacement options for Hero Miniatures games. But the weird thing that happened was a bunch of other people were like, why do you have to stop playing the game? If you don't play it that much, you're not going to, bump against the edges for a long time. You've still got a bunch of models. So I was like, oh my God, that's true. So I played once with Reese, and we had a blast, and we enjoyed it. And I really, really what I didn't know is they came out with a second edition of rules. And the rules are still free. So I went through the new rules, and it seems like the same game, but, a little streamlined, and that's neat, and I like that. And I found a bunch of other stuff. There's some battle reports on YouTube that I really enjoyed. And so I thought, you know what? I do still like it. And then something clicked in my head, and it was a bad click. It was a very bad click, because there's a bunch of models that I still didn't have for the Marvel Miniatures game, and I just started buying them. I went out and I found every model that they made for the game. And then one nice thing that Knight did do was just before they killed it all and cut it all off, but long enough for people who are savvy in those sorts of things to catch it, they put up cards for every model they had ever made, even if it was the Spider-Man game, which is a different game with a different rule set with different stats and everything. They put up Marvel Universe Miniatures game rules for all those Spider-Man models. And then they put up all the rules for the cards, the miniatures they were going to release that they didn't release yet. So that included a bunch of, not a bunch, but a few, Loki, Thanos, two others that I can't remember right now. But anyway, so there's no models for those, but there are rules. And of course you have Hero Clicks, and there's a couple other places that I've been told that you can get models that are similar. And so it was crazy. It was great. It started with the Hulkbuster armor. I really wanted the Hulkbuster armor, but I didn't really want the Hulk. And then I watched a battle report that had the Hulk, and I was like, oh my God, that is a giant model. It's huge. It's like 8 times the size of a regular model. So then I was like, oh, I want that. So then I was like, well, I should probably, I've always liked the Gambit model. Okay, I'm going to go get that. So so then I want all of the X-Men. Okay, so I've got to go find Hawkeye now. Okay, now I found Hawkeye. Okay, now I need Vision. Okay, now I finally found. I'm tracking down on. I went to 3 different online stores. I went to 2 different eBay purveyors. I actually managed to pay below retail for all but one of the models that I bought, including a very nice man in Georgia who had a bunch of the models. And he had, that's where I got the Hulk, actually. And he had buy it now or best offer. And his buy it now, these models were going for $22, okay? His buy it now was $13.50. And I don't know what audacity caused me to ask for 10, but I asked for 10. He had 3 models. And he said yes, and I got all 3. And then he got the Hulk. And I was like, oh my God, that's going to be great. And I had everything but Jean Grey. And Jean Grey, the X-Men I was lukewarmish on the X-Men. And so Jean Grey was the only one I didn't have of all the heroes that they make. And I didn't have Dr. Octopus, which I couldn't find anywhere and I don't really care about. And I didn't have the Green Goblin, which I can find, but I don't really care about either. Other than those, the only other one I can't find that I would want is Electra, and I can't find her anywhere. So if you know where I could pick up an Electra, give me a note or drop me a line. But anyway, so Jean Grey is the only one I paid over the retail for, and even with the shipping, it was only like $5 over the retail. So I don't feel bad about that. I do feel bad about the fact that I just dropped. I mean, these are still not cheap models, and I think I just picked up like 12 more. So that's way over. That's over $100 somewhere. I don't want to do the math, because when you spend money like this and in this fast and in this many different increments, it adds up quick. And then in a battle report, I saw they had this awesome Sentinel wreckage on the table, and I was like, oh, I wonder if you can find that. And I found it, and I just wanted a hand and a head, because that's what they had in the battle report, and I thought that was awesome. And I really thought it was neat, and I wanted to check that out. Guerrilla Miniatures Games, by the way, is why I just stopped, because I really wanted to give these guys a shout out, because they've done several. They did several. I don't know if they've done any since the game was canceled. It looks like most of their stuff was done in October and November. But fun, awesome terrain, beautifully painted models, and fun little missions and things like that. Because as I learned again, they had 3 more, so now there's 6 really cool little thematic missions. So like Reese and I were playing. I don't know how this would fit into the real Marvel universe, but apparently there was a rain of Infinity Stones, and they were all over the table. And every time a model picked one up, it got some new power and ability, and you could steal them from each other. And the only thing I don't like about all those missions is they've got a bizarre mathematical formula in how you get victory points. It's not just hold this for X number of turns or whatever. It's like if you hold this for 3 turns, you get 1, and blah, 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 and you got to track all this weird stuff. But other than that, I think they're really, really neat. So I thought the Sentinel was cool, so I went and tracked it down on eBay, and it went through all these convoluted twists and turns, and ended up buying the head and a foot because they were a pair, and then I bought the chest because it was cheap, and then I bought the hand, and it just kept going on and on. So I got all that. Then I got a whole bunch of really cool. HeroClix has a bunch of cool 3-dimensional little objective counters. Well, they're not objective counters in HeroClix. I think they're like 3D objects is what they're called. But there's like Infinity Stones on pedestals, and there's other gems on pedestals, and there's the Palantir, which I got a bunch of because they look cool. And they're made out of clear like translucent plastic and then painted. And the paint job's only 1 or 2 colors. It's not that big a deal. I mean, you ink it and look even cooler. The cool thing is that it's solid, but then it has this cool translucent gem of various different colors on it. And so I got a bunch of those. They have Captain America's shield is out there for super cheap. So I got one of those. They have the awesome from Iron Man 2, the suitcase that turns into the Iron Man armor. They have those out there. I got 3. I don't know why. Like I said, I'm going insane. So these things start arriving, of course, at the house, and that's how Karen knows that I've gone nutty and I've been spending way too much of my money. So I got the first one that came was the chest plate, and I opened it up, and I was like, it's tiny. I hope everything else is a little bigger than this. And then I got the head and the foot. And the head is a little bit bigger than the chest plate would indicate, but not much bigger. And then the foot is enormous. It's ridiculous. None of them are in scale to the actual models for the Marvel Universe Miniatures game, of course, by the way. But they just look cool. These little pieces of wreckage will like kind of brighten up any table to make it look Marvel-y, I think, is what I was thinking. Anyway, so that's where I am. And I don't know if I'm going to ever play this game again, except with Reese. And even then, I'm good because we had fun, and I love building these little tables. And so I shouldn't have done that, though. I shouldn't have spent that money. I should have been able to just not spend it. But that's the point. I can't stop myself. And just like I can't stop myself from talking now, apparently, about this game that's now dead. But I've talked way too much now. So that's all I've got to say about this. And I'm sorry to just babble on, but it was stuck in my head. Thanks for listening, and good night.
Achievement unlocked.
You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@the d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
I think in computer games anyway, typically the process is that you lock the game design and then you build the story afterwards, which to me is a kind of an odd way of going about things, because what I found working on a couple of other games was that if you start the storytelling process earlier and the world design earlier, you actually unlock a bunch of interesting concepts that can lead to original gameplay rather than just tending to pursue gameplay for the sake of gameplay. And I think it's that kind of back and forth. And, of course, then someone comes up with a really interesting gameplay idea, and then that actually comes back and informs the world. And then it's kind of this back and forth process, and I kind of feel like it's the best of both worlds to create something holistic and interesting.
Yeah, I think that's true.